I think that was maybe Jim reminding us to start recording the meeting. So when you're ready, we found the button, so.
All right. All right, very good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming in person and online. Just to let everybody know, we do have quorum in the room. So we are gonna go ahead and conduct full meeting. We'll do approval of minutes in the agenda. We also had quorum last time, so we don't have a backlog to approve, which is nice. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and for those who are participating online, thanks for logging on. What I'd like to do, if everyone can bear with me, I know we do have a little bit of adjustment that we've been able to make where we've got the recording of folks who are participating online, but since those of you may not be able to see very well who all is in the room, let's go around the room real quick and do introductions so that those online know who's here. Dave, do you mind if we start with you?
David Maturin, Michigan Lakes and Streams Association.
Megan Tinsley, Michigan Environmental Council.
Rachel Proctor, Consumers Energy.
Kelly Turner, Michigan Potato Industry Commission.
Tom Frazier, MTA retired.
Abby Eaton, Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development.
Bree Hammondtree with General Solutions.
Laura Campbell with Michigan Farm Bureau.
Brian Burrows with Trout Unlimited.
Katie Lindstrom with Bar Engineering Company.
Megan Napier with AKT Peerless.
Ben Terrell, Michigan Farm Bureau.
Doug Needham with the Aggregate Association. Mike Frederick, Michigan Groundwater Association.
Chris Alexander, Eagle.
Joel Henry, ECT. Austin, North Eagle.
Andy LeBaron, Legal.
Okay, and at the back of the room.
Tina Pappas, Eagle.
Marion Merrick, Eagle.
Megan Cameron, Eagle.
Lynn Senator with Eagle.
Ross Almer with you.
All right, thanks, everyone. Appreciate that. With the roll call here in the room, and we've got captured, looking at you for confirmation there, Bree, we've got captured the names of the folks who are online, or do I need to read them?
Yes, we have them captured.
Okay.
Good to go.
Perfect, awesome. All right, well, at this point, I will ask if there's any additions or changes that we need to make to today's agenda. And we'll see if there's any objections to or additions or edits that need to be made to today's agenda. All right, hearing and seeing none. Folks online, don't forget, most of you are muted, so if you need to speak up, don't forget to raise your hand or unmute yourself. We'll go ahead and approve or ask for any changes or edits to the minutes from our last meeting. And Jim.
Emily Finnell from Office of the Great Lakes has some comments, so I'll turn it over to Emily.
Hi, everybody. So I apologize for getting these comments in a little bit late. I did make some significant edits to the language in the minutes regarding the Water User Committee project. And I sent those to Jim and Chris this morning. And mainly just to clarify the way the information was organized in the notes was a bit on how it was talked about, but I reordered it so that it sort of follows more of the summary of how the project is funded with Eagle's money to U of M and to MSU. So that was clear, laid out the overall project purpose, and then included the comments regarding the Water User Committee pilots and some of the concerns that were raised there. And then the next steps for the overall project to be wrapped up and completed later this year. So I submitted those with the markups kind of hidden because there was a lot of reordering and some edits to it. So I just wanted to submit those for the revised minutes.
Okay, is there any way to pull those up on the screen so that folks can take a quick look at that before we approve the minutes as edited?
Jim's going to try to pull them up here from the email I sent. I can try joining and just sharing my screen because I have them up. So
Yeah.
give me just a minute.
Andy, right now, you guys are sharing the screen, so that would be.
Yeah. We can stop office for a second.
You might be able to share over here.
Oh, you go.
You know. think it'll share over and then when she stops.
Okay, that's cool.
We don't have a lot down. Step. Fingers crossed.
Laura, while we're waiting for that, I'm assuming on the agenda, we are gonna talk about the Auditor General report, some spot.
Yes.
Okay, are folks
Yes.
seeing my screen?
No.
So you'll see just in the first paragraph, I just summarized the funding arrangement because it's a little confusing. It's a
Hang on,
co-funded
hang on,
project.
hang on. We don't have it up in the room yet. How did we get?
Oh.
Sorry.
I don't think there is a way that she can share these TVs. Because these TVs are an extension of your just, why don't you drag your teams and take them up to the TV? Don't do it. Just take that order,
Try to put it in
drag.
the chat. Let's see here.
Yeah, all the way, all the way up. All the way up. Yeah,
There.
yeah.
Are those the notes right there? Okay, I'm just gonna forward them to you.
Make that screen bigger, Andy, while you're showing it up on the TVs here in the room. Can you, yep, close the participants list and that'll make that bigger.
It's also on the side.
Yep. Oh, we lost it.
Oh, we lost it.
Just stop sharing.
Do you want me to share it again? I thought you were sending it as an attachment.
No,
Yes.
if you can share it.
No, yeah, if you
Okay.
could, please share it. Perfect.
On the video stream.
Okay, so everybody
Why?
can see it? I'll
Yep.
just really briefly walk through what I did. So the first paragraph just summarizes the funding, just to make that a little clearer, because it's a little confusing. And it was later on in the third or fourth paragraph of the notes. Then I go on to summarize just the purpose of the project that was in the notes previously. And then the order of the steps that the MSU research team is undertaking. So much of the language is the same. I just reordered it and kind of put it in a way that made a little more sense as flow. And then I think the third paragraph talks about the concerns that were raised by some of the participants that were invited as part of the pilot water user committees. And then as you move on to the notes, this was a really long section of the meeting minutes. Then I talk about kind of the next steps for the overall project to try to ensure results, final reports, and deliverables can still be completed and inform Eagle's work in terms of next steps and working with water user committees. And then part of the notes that were previously in there too talked about some questions posed about timing and possible grant extension. So this got into a lot of minutia. So I tried to clean that up a little bit and talk about the next steps in terms of timing of the grant. And then kind of left it as a little bit of the commentary at the end. So those are the changes that I submitted this morning.
Motion to accept you.
Yeah, I think this is significant enough. If you guys are all right with it, I wanna take a motion and actually do a vote. We usually do stuff just generally by consensus and see if there's objections, but I also want to be respectful of the discussion and make sure everybody's comfortable with how those minutes reflect that discussion went. So I'll take a motion in a second. We'll do some discussion and actually take a vote.
I'll make a motion.
All right. And do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Tom, okay. And any discussion?
Is there a way to help this reflect Jason's comments about the availability of growers to participate in the project? Because I think Emily had mentioned that the project team felt that because it was planting season, that they wouldn't be available. But Jason had said they weren't asked if they had availability.
So, I think again, this is where we don't have Adam here. most of us were not part of those conversations. I think it's really difficult if we're talking about some of the pieces of the information to try to capture that fully in the notes. Because it's really, looking back at the discussion, really didn't fully embody the nature of the issues that were going on. So what I tried to do, Kelly, was just to summarize that the timeframe issues lie with time constraints with the grant period, the growing season, availability of growers to participate in the project, and the project team having additional time to be able to gather that information, refine it to finalize the guidebooks. And I noted earlier, I kept the comments in there about the growers expressing concerns and questions, and the project team's process to try to address those. But I think some things were discussed at the last meeting, but not everything was discussed, and the project team was not available to be there for the discussion. So the growers were invited to participate in the pilot water user committees, and several efforts were made to include their participation. What I added earlier in the notes just indicates that that the MSU project team was not able to successfully convene those pilot water user committees. And part of that was because of the participants choosing not to participate in the process.
Right, but I don't think that that's actually clear about what happened, Emily, right? And so if we're putting out in minutes, it's hard to look at that and have my back to you, I'm sorry. So if we're putting in minutes and trying to capture discussion, right, which is what this is, the growers did meet with the researchers. It was in the second step where they said, hey, before we go farther, they wrote those 2 letters and said, we'd like these things addressed. And because of time constraints with the project, there isn't time, the researchers felt, to go back and do that. And I just want that to be reflected in these statements, because these statements really aren't accurate in capturing the discussion that happened.
Emily, can you kind of scroll up just a little bit so that folks can see that paragraph that starts with several participants? So what I'm hearing is, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing is you're asking for maybe because the groups did meet initially, but then had concerns about continuing, that you want to say the MSU project team was not able to successfully reconvene these groups because they did meet? And then,
That would be one thing. I'm actually fine with this paragraph.
okay,
I think it was where
But then-
Emily was. if you
yep,
scroll
and then
down.
the following paragraph, the one after the one that says work with the project team.
No, I was good with that one too.
Okay,
It was where you were.
Oh,
just a
okay,
minute
okay,
ago.
sorry,
Yeah,
yep.
Sorry.
back up to the previous one.
No, I think it's lower. Oh, wait.
So you want me to scroll further
Was
down?
that there was,
Yes.
Yeah,
right
there we
the-
go, there we
the
go.
question posed, so it says the time frame issues lie with time constraints with the grant period, which I think we identified it at the last meeting as really that is the reason why they don't have the time to go back and address those concerns.
okay, so
Right, so it isn't that the growing season isn't the issue, Jason said, and the availability of growers to participate. Well, that might, it wasn't their availability, it's that there isn't time to address their concerns. So those 2 items, I think, don't really go here because that's not what the discussion was. The discussion
Well, I think I
was-
made the comment in the meeting, Kelly, that the project team believed that the only time that the growers would be available to participate in the pilot user committees to make it convenient for them was to be outside of the growing season. So the project team was working in good faith that that was the ideal time to meet with growers to not interfere with the growing season. So that was a held belief and understanding of the MSU project team. And I did mention that at the previous meeting. So we could add a clarification, but again, this is where my comfort level significantly declines. And speaking on behalf of the MSU project team who wasn't able to be in the room, which we did make a really strong point at the beginning of this discussion, that they weren't able to participate because of their teaching schedule. to be able to speak directly on behalf of the project team. So I could add language here that says the MSU project team is to accommodate growers. You know, their understanding was that there was a preferred availability of those growers during the season or during outside of the growing season.
Right, I just want to make sure Jason's point of view was captured here because he said they were never asked. Because he was one of the participants. And so this, unless there's some clarification added to this, which is all I'm asking for, so that both sides are reflected in this, in the captured discussion.
So, I mean, again, there's a lot of detail back and forth in here. Do we need this paragraph or can we just delete it?
Well, maybe a solution that might be to incorporate what I think is a very important point, that we don't have an extension capability for this grant. Maybe the best way to capture that is to start with this second sentence. Well,
They weren't invited, I know.
sentence says, but take the second sentence and then the time frame issue lies with the time constraints for the grant period. Get rid of the statements that say the growing season and the availability of growers to participate in the project, and then continue on, and the project team having additional time to be able to gather that information and refine it into the guidebooks. Because then that kind of captures the, hey, we don't have time to address the growers' concerns because we can't extend the grant.
Yeah.
Does that work for everybody? Just getting rid of those two phrases, the growing season and the availability of growers to participate in the project, and just having this and just shortening the sentence that way.
Probably that works.
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah.
Emily?
I think I don't think that the only constraint is the grant period and the project team having additional time to gather.
Yeah.
But I think.
Or Emily, this is Jeremiah, over here. We also have some constraints with the letter of being able to come back and address those producers until certain things have been met, as which was identified in the letter. There were a couple that our project team was able to address, but there's some that were bigger than our project team to be able to address. So some of these will preclude us from being able to get back with those producers, at least as their letter identified, until some of those things were met. And those are outside of some of our control to be able to do that.
Do you have some suggestions, Jeremiah, for language then to put that into these minutes that clarify that?
I can work on some, or I can ask Adam to work on some. You know, we can, there are additional farmers too, right? So it's not like this group of farmers are the only farmers that are irrigating or you know, having work with the water withdrawal assessment tool in the process. So we can bring in some additional farmers. It's not we don't have to have this particular group you know, to get feedback from. So we do plan on bringing in some additional farmers to be able to address those issues. But I think, as Emily is pointing out, to be able to reflect all the things that were going on in there, I think we need to have some additional comments that were put in there. Maybe have Adam get a chance to review those because he's not had a chance to look at those.
Or, you know, I would just propose that we delete that whole sentence.
So you would have this paragraph read, a question was posed regarding the possibility of extending the time and allowing individuals to gather more information and address the issues brought forward, and then skip directly to, there was a hard stop.
Why don't we just end the sentence before, the time frame issues lie with time constraints with the grant period, you know, just period. And then there's a hard stop for the Sea grant in January of 2025 and continue there.
Does that work for folks here? It's basically just, instead of taking out those two middle phrases, it's just taking out the rest of the sentence.
I think the point of the minutes is to capture what we talked about at the last meeting. So if there's things here that are extra, I don't know that they should be here, so.
Our other option is if folks aren't comfortable with the language today, we can certainly postpone approving the minutes and take them back and keep working on them because we want to make sure that they reflect what people feel like was discussed. Because we did have Jason here at the last meeting and he did bring up some concerns in the meeting. So, so I don't want to ignore it. And at the same time, I don't want to prevent the project team from being able to provide, the information that they need either. So I'm also happy to propose if someone wants to make the motion that we postpone approving the minutes and maybe work on that language a little bit more. If folks aren't comfortable with the way that sentence would read. Thoughts?
I'm good with the change that Emily proposed, because I
Okay.
think that is a better capture of the discussion that happened, and that's what the minutes are, right? It isn't us debating what the project team, if everybody agrees on or anything. It's like, what did we talk about at the last meeting?
Okay. So what we would have is the minutes would be amended to say the time frame issue lies with the time constraints with the grant period. There is a hard stop for MISG in January 2025. An extension is not possible due to their federal grant award, blah, 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 blah. Folks comfortable with that?
Yep.
Okay, so since I said I was gonna take a vote on this, since it was a pretty substantial change, if there's no more discussion, we'll go ahead and do a vote on approving the minutes as amended with the changes that Emily put in and the additional amendment of shortening that sentence in paragraph, whatever that is, number 4 in that section. Can folks online, those voting members of the council, can you raise your hands so that we can collect the vote? We'll go ahead and take votes to approve the minutes as amended. So voting council members, if you could raise your hand in the room and online, and we'll do a quick count. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, and then I've got 12, 13, 14. All right, I've got 14 ayes. Okay, everybody can lower their hands. And then I'm going to ask the same question. Those who do not approve the meeting minutes as amended, this would be your nay vote. Raise your hand online or in the room. We do not have any votes of nay, so we'll go ahead and approve the meeting minutes as amended. Thanks, guys, for your patience on that, and thank you for the good discussion. I appreciate that. All right. At this point, unless there's any more questions or discussion, and Mike, we did ask about the agenda, including a discussion of the OAG report. We had intended to include that in the Eagle update, if that works for you.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I said yes, but I realized I didn't fully address your question, so I didn't want to ignore you there.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and at this time, oh, yeah, Margaret.
Yeah, I didn't have a change to the agenda or anything, but I did want to make just a real brief announcement that Elizabeth Morisseau will be sitting on these meetings in my place moving forward. So I wanted to make sure that it was reflected on the attendance that she was there, and just make a quick announcement to everybody. A lot of you already know Elizabeth. I know that she's also, for those of you who don't know her, she's an assistant attorney general as well in my office. So I just wanted to make that quick announcement before we got too far down the line.
All right, great. Thanks, Margaret, and welcome, Elizabeth.
All right, thanks.
Morisseau.
I can get it for you, Brady.
Okay, thank you. Yep. All right. Thanks. At this time, if there aren't any questions or thoughts from the group, we'll go ahead and move into public comment. And most of you guys are pretty familiar with this. We do 2 public comment periods. The first one we like to reserve for agenda items. And then the second one is an open comment period where you can kind of talk about whatever's whatever's relevant and whatever you want the group to hear. So at this time, does anyone have public comment to make about agenda items?
I actually do. So, I sent out a request for members to update their committee status, as well as where they're sitting in their committees. So if you haven't already completed that, if you could please, I can resend the email, but if you can look at the list and verify your information, if you have somebody who's replacing you as an alternative, or if you want to join a different committee or something like that, just let me know. That way I can get that list updated and make sure we have the most current information on file.
Did everybody receive that email? Should we send it again?
I sent it pretty periodically. Twice. I've done probably the twice campaign for this month and then previously I did it a few times, so.
Let's, Bree, if you don't mind sending it again, just to make sure that it's up at the top of folks' inboxes, because I know those inboxes get full quick.
There's
And-
still quite a lot of stuff that needs to be updated. That's
Yep.
why we're
Yeah.
persistent about it, because as we review it, there's some really old contacts with it still. So we know that there's still enough that needs to happen.
Some of that might be too, we have people that like hop on and off, and they attend sometimes. It's like, who do you consider like on the committee?
Well, we have the list of the folks who are the official named members and their alternates.
And that should be the only ones that we include. No.
Well, we have a big long list of anybody who has interest in Water Use Advisory Council. I mean, that list is like 100 people, who just want to get updates, on what's going on with the council and the committees and stuff. And we certainly don't restrict, like if somebody wants to attend a committee meeting, they can do that too. But what we're trying to do is make sure that we've got like the official list is updated. So if you changed your alternate or if you need to update contact information or any of that kind of thing, we need to make sure that that list for the actual council members is updated. And then also to make sure that everybody who is on the council, who is a member of a committee or wants to be added as a member of a committee, or who says, hey, I'm really ready to take that leadership challenge and be a co-chair of a committee, that's reflected too. So that's the purpose of this, is not to try to restrict who can be on it or who can attend anything. It's just to make sure that we've got the list updated for, okay, who are our council members that are doing specific things. Does that make sense? Great, awesome. Any other public comment? All right. Seeing none, I think we can jump into committee chair reports. I've got data collection committee up first, Megan and Brian.
Ready to go?
Two.
Okay. We attempted to schedule a meeting and we ended up canceling it at the last minute. We had a very low number of people confirm for it. We need to schedule the next meeting. At this point, the next meeting is going to be really focused on making sure we hear from everybody on whether there are any topics that people wish to turn into recommendations for the next report, and then become laser focused if there are some identified, moving those forward and developing them. I would say, I think from the data committee perspective, we are hung up to some degree because between the 2020 recommendations and then the 2022 recommendations, we listed the building blocks that we need in order to move forward. And until, in many regards, until some of those 2020 projects which are underway are completed, and until we can get the funding for the 2022, makes it pretty hard to move to steps 3 and 4 if you can't get past steps 1 and 2. And a lot of those recommendations were truly building blocks for steps that we have to have done. So I wouldn't anticipate a long list of brand new recommendations. At this point, we may end up repeating ourselves on the 2022 recommendations. But the next meetings will be focused on trying to hear from everybody and see if there are some other topics that we can move forward. Yeah. That's it, Megan.
I think that's it. I mean, I feel like we didn't get a good response to your last email to the committee about topics, so we'll refresh that.
And that'll probably be something too for the write-up of our report, depending on any update that we have, given Dave's excellent efforts downtown, and we'll thank you for that. But I intend on coming back to that when we get to the Eagle update. But I think it'll be important for the report to reflect, hey, we're working on a lot of things from 2020. We haven't gotten the funding yet from 2022. And until those things happen, future recommendations are gonna be very limited in their ability to be made and to be thought about, because we've got to get these building blocks out of the way first. So that's probably a pretty good thing to keep in mind for that report. Okay. Questions for Brian and Megan for the data committee? All right. Models committee.
All right. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are. We can hear you.
Great. Okay, great. So what I want to start with is that in the SSR work group, we started talking about the 10-day requirement for response on the SSRs. And I would like to have Austin York give us some information as to how long it actually takes for the department to respond to these SSRs. And then this will form the basis of what I'm going to discuss after that. But Austin, if you could give these numbers, explain the slide, that would be very helpful.
Sure, yeah, I can do that. So I had a look at the time range between January 2023 and April 2024. Look at all the SSRs we completed in that time. It looks like those bar colors are a little different than I sent. So the leftmost bar in each of those bins is the administrative review, and the rightmost bar in each of those bins is the technical review. So I classified each of those 235 by into those categories where administrative review is just a kind of like just paperwork really for the most part. That applies to anything that has baseline capacity. Just confirming it has baseline capacity and registering it with that capacity, or baseline transcript or anything like that. So it's usually our quickest type of SSR. And before I keep going, so frequency is the y-axis, how many of each of those existed for that category for that time. And then that x-axis are the different time ranges. So 0 to 10 days, 10 to 20 days, 20 to 30 days, and so on. The next category is geology review. So that's when we are conducting the SSR for a new registration that does not have baseline capacity. Places that come to mind would be like Monroe County, where you have a very thick confining layer. When we do our geology review, looking at all the nearby stream reaches that it could be debiting from, and we see that there's just a ton of confining material, we'll often stop at that point and give it a geology pass. So that's the limit of the work regarding those. The next category is technical review. So if we do the geology review and we see that it's not isolated from the pumped aquifer is not completely isolated from any of the stream reaches, any of the surface water we're trying to regulate, we'll then start to branch out and look for additional data, OGS reports, pumping tests performed by the cities, any municipality. Without either of those, we'll start to fall back to the QUIM data set. But that's at that point, we'll start to try to parameterize our different depletion models and make estimates on our end. That usually takes the longest for us to do. So those are what those categories represent. And that is a distribution of the 3 categories into 5 different time bins from about the last year. The point of it is to show that for a couple of types, we very often go over the 10-day deadline, just because of how long it can take us to do all that, or just the volume of them that we're working on in a particular time, and also the amount of time it takes to do each one.
So the number in the technical review, that does not incorporate any of the previous numbers as well. That one said it went all the way to the end. Right?
Yes, yeah, they're exclusively, so technical reviews. Like I said, we looked at it, it's not geology fast, we have to make our estimations as best we can. And then the red, that's, so the amount that were delayed for additional information being needed, just maybe pump information. Usually it's pump information, or maybe like data, if they had submitted data, but I've never come across that once I've done, so typically it's administrative stuff. That's marked, as a number to the right of the number above each of those bars, so only 8 out of the 235 were delayed due to that, and they're shown on the graph as well.
Okay, are there any questions on this graph? I want to make sure this is understood before we move on. Okay, if there aren't any, what I'd like to do is make sure there's a number of points that I want to make sure we understand here. So an applicant has no idea what category they're going to be in when they send in their application for the SSR. This is strictly as the department goes through it, this is how they handle it. So something may come in, and as far as the department is concerned, it becomes just an administrative review. They're able to look at, what's registered in the area, maybe make some adjustments, talk to some people, and it's really a pretty quick process. And you can see they're doing a really pretty good job of meeting the 10-day requirement there. And I know they work really hard to try to do that, but they're like around 90% or in that range. But you get into the other categories, and again, ahead of time, nobody knows what they're going to have. So if it gets into where there's a more geology review, it's not just looking at what's being used by other people, what the history is of these wells, what well capacity is, and what history has been, kind of the administrative side of things, but more of what is the geology like here. They still use analytical models to make a decision, but they're trying to make some interpretation on the geologist. How do we best interpret the geology and then apply our analytical models? They do a pretty good job of getting it done quickly, but almost you get out to 20 days before you're getting the vast majority of those. And then when you have the more complicated technical reviews where there's a lot that the department has to dig into, and it frequently ends up with some negotiations with the applicant, maybe a consultant is involved in it or will become involved in it. There's just a lot of questions, a lot more information is likely needed, and it just takes a long time. So as the work group looking at the SSR process, we looked at this graph and we had a unanimous conclusion saying the 10-day requirement that's in the legislation just is not working. It's not good customer service to applicants to even have them think that it's going to be done within 10 days. Only the very simplest applications, which is a relatively small percentage, can be met in 10 days. And so our thought is that we think that should be changed, which would require statutory change. So what I'm doing today is I just wanted to talk with the council about this. I think that we're going to have to think about this as a council because this is something that would require a change in the law. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put out a rough idea for you. This is a concept. I will use numbers, but these are not the final numbers. They're just numbers to give you something to think about. And what we will do is that the work group has said we'd like to do this. We're going to bring this back to the full models committee, and the models committee will work on this and come up with a formal recommendation that we will bring back to the council with actual numbers. But I want you to be able to look at this and think about this and actually give us some feedback today. So what we are thinking about is that extending the number of working days that the department has to complete an SSR. And again, just for a starting number, I'm going to say 20 days. And you notice if it was 20 days, you're getting not only almost all the ones that are a simple administrative review, you're getting almost all of the ones that are a geologic review as well. So the department would be able to meet that timeline in the vast majority of cases. And that would be a good thing. Now, we still have quite a few that drift out for a long time. Now, a lot of the time, the reason is the department needs more information, and they'll ask for that. And one of the problems is that the clock never stops. So they can ask for information and say 30 days later, 60 days later, the applicant responds. Well, that 30 or 60 days is added onto the amount of time that is charged here towards the department working on it. So we want to also bring in the concept of tolling the clock. So what that means is if the department asks for more information, the clock is tolled. That means it's stopped. So say they asked for more information at day 8. They would just stop there at day 8. And then when the information comes back, generally these are more complicated projects. So our thought is that we would start the clock again. It would be a new clock, not starting at 8, but would be starting at 0. And there would be 2 elements of this new clock. One is that the department would have a number of days, and again, for talking purposes, I'll say 10. The department would have 10 days to respond and say, wait, you know, we asked for more information or more details on a model or whatever it is, and you just haven't supplied it. We can't make a decision based on what you gave us. And then that would toll the clock of the second new clock. Now, on this new clock, the department would have 20 working days to complete the site-specific review. And again, these numbers can be something different, but I'm just trying to give you an idea, give you something to think about. So if, say, at day 5, the department tolls the second clock, when the information comes in, it starts again at day 5 and then continues out to the 20 days. So that is the concept that we want to work in. The main things are increasing the requirement, how many days for the department to meet the SSR, something like 20 days, and that we think that that would be good customer service, gives people more realistic estimates how long it's going to take, and also give the department the ability to toll the clock if they need more information and not be held against them because they're waiting for information, and to help the applicant that if they give the department more information, there's a new clock that the department just can't sit on this or can't take a long time to run with it. And so we think this brings in important concepts. And what I'd like to do is get feedback from the council as to, do you agree with these concepts? And let's talk about that. If you have ideas on the days that I threw out, I'd like to hear that as well. And one of the other things that I think we should think about is that, you know, generally we do work and everything goes into our recommendation at the end of the year, which will be seen by the next legislature. I would like to consider us, if as a council we decide this is really important, we'd like to move it forward. I think we need to consider, do we want to move forward with this legislature? That next year the Senate will be the same, but the House, we've got no idea what that'll be like. It could be very, very different because about 1/3 of the House members will be gone, and maybe change of who's majority party. All sorts of things can change. So we may want to make a strategic decision and say that let's move this forward. Let's talk to the governor's office. Let's start talking to the legislature and see if they have interest and would be willing to move something like this forward. So those are the couple things I'd like to get some feedback on from the council.
So I'll jump in here. I guess one of the big concerns that I hear, at least from our segment of the industry, is just that proverbial, I just need more information. Just could you submit one more piece of information? And that seems to always delay the clock. So the tolling of the clock, I guess maybe for that first round of, hey, you know, we do need some additional information, but from that point forward, I don't think we should have the clock stop anymore. That if there's going to be additional information, let's not have it come in drips. Let's have it all be one, because that's just the concerns that I hear is, boy, once I answer that question, then I get another request for stuff, and then it starts over, and then I get another request. So that's the only thing is that I would ask.
Okay, thank you.
We'll say I hear a very similar sentiment from a lot of growers who, in other programs, we'll say, hey, we're frustrated that when we apply for permits, it tends to be the same thing, that there's a deadline for response to a permit application, but the clock stops if it's determined that the application's incomplete, and they have the perception, right or wrong, that it's a tool to drag out the clock and to make things take longer. And so I have a lot of concerns about that being officially a part of the water use program. Is that, is that it's going to increase the perception in the countryside that the department has this ability to sort of run the clock out by asking for one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. I'll also say that I know that farmers have put into our policy book that they really prioritize timely response to site-specific reviews and to water withdrawal requests. And at the same time, I want to acknowledge that in some of these cases, it's just going to be impossible to get done in 10 days. And so I wonder if there's a possibility of, we've got to think about this maybe in a more nuanced way. Because I think our farmers would be very uncomfortable with like a blanket, let's just make the statute say 20 days, or let's make the statute say this. But to reflect what's really necessary and what's really involved in a site-specific review, to kind of help give users the comfort of knowing that, hey, if my request is pretty straightforward and simple, I want it done fast. And at the same time, acknowledging that if something ends up being complex, if we need more data, more, geologic information or surveys, that there's the capability of getting that done, which I know is not an easy thing for your group to tackle, Dave, but I wanted to make sure that, since you're asking for opinions, that's, our growers do have a lot of concerns about that.
I like your thinking, and I'd like to ask a question on that. So that I think it's a good idea, and I think, what it would mean, I think, and see if I'm consistent with your thinking, is that we'd have to have some kind of commitment from the department saying, hey, we're going to do it as fast as we can. So if we're done in 5 days, we're done in 5 days. If it takes 10 days and we get all of these administrative reviews done, we're still going to do that. So would it be a matter of trying to get some kind of commitment? I'm not sure how to write this up, but I think that that's a fair idea to say that, the department's going to move things along as quickly as they can and not try to wait out to 20 days or whatever a larger number would be. Would something along that line meet what you're thinking of, Laura?
Possibly. That definitely reflects the concern that, that I tend to hear from farmers.
Okay. All right.
You've got your hand up, and Kelly, it looks like you've got a thought too. Let's do Jim and then Kelly.
Okay. I think it's fair and reasonable to place the burden on Eagle to, one, if we're going to, when we do our completeness review, the burden should be on Eagle to identify all of the missing information. But the clock should remain told until we get a complete response. So if we get a partial response, then the clock remains told until all of those missing items are addressed. And then, yep, by all means, start the clock, resume the clock, carry forward, and hold us accountable for meeting the deadline.
Jim, I want to make sure I'm clear. You're thinking on this second clock that we were talking about?
Right. Yep. So it shouldn't be.
And I want to be clear, because what was said earlier by Doug is that he didn't even like the idea of having a clock on the second part. And so, we're not trying to resolve this now, but I want to make sure we're just clear on what the thinking is. So you're thinking that even though we've stopped and we've asked for more information, you need time to be able to say, I've clearly got the information, or I don't. Is that?
Yeah, I think, Dave, I think that makes sense for that standpoint. If there is something missing, or if there's additional information that's needed, all I want to do is make sure that all that information is brought in at one point, and then the clock begins again.
So you're
Okay.
also asking for some accountability to put in so that they can come back later and be like, oh, now we need this data,
Correct.
right? So
Correct.
have to build in some sort of accountability piece.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that, the idea then of having a second clock or a second due date on this is that, okay, we said you need more information, but there would still be time to say what that is and it's actually arrived.
Yeah.
We'll work on this. I really appreciate this feedback, and are there others that have comments?
Kelly, you had a comment
Yeah.
also?
Dave, can you help me understand? You mentioned that really this is customer service, right? So people have an expectation, like, hey, the statute says 10 days. But for some of these more complicated pieces where you've got geological and some technical reviews in there, gathering that data and information is gonna take longer. What is the purpose of opening up statute, which makes the entire thing vulnerable to changes more than just this one? Tell me what the end goal is. Is it, I'm trying to weigh like the importance of putting 20 days in a statute when really there isn't anything right now that says, you know,
There's no
You're
penalty
gonna-
for going
we're gonna-
past the deadline.
yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're gonna see a report, but that can be explained very easily by showing the complexity of the ones that take longer.
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple answers to that, Kelly, and one is that the work group that is looking at the SSR process, I mean, it was unanimous. Everyone's involved with it, consultants, department, other people all agreed that the 10 days as a requirement just doesn't work. It's not happening. And I get what you're saying. And the question is, and that's what we as a council are going to have to decide. Do we want to take the risk to open it up and with the idea of just having a larger number? I think that the advantages is that one, that we have an audit, which the department had an audit, which we'll be talking about later. I think this is one of the issues that was raised there. So this actually fits in pretty well with that. If the department can't meet the deadline for good reasons, and I think there are good reasons on a regular basis, is that a realistic deadline to have out there? Now, I do think we need to do a better job of, or the department needs to do a better job of explaining to people what it does and how it does things, so that the people are sure that if something is quick and easy, it's done fast. If something's more complicated, the department's still diligent, but it takes time to do some of these things. So, so I think we do have to work on that nuance, but those are the reasons why we're doing it. It was unanimous in our work group that it just isn't working, and the auditors picked up on it as well. And it's just something that the department doesn't look good. It's not meeting a deadline. And if it's an unrealistic deadline, then maybe it should be changed.
So one question that I got here too is when these applications are submitted for the review, how long for you guys to look at this? Says this probably just needs an administrative review. This probably needs a geology review. This needs the technical, or is it an iterative process as you go through?
Austin, can you answer that?
Sure. When we begin the review, how long until it's clear to us what category we're kind of falling?
Yeah.
I think with administrative, it needing maybe just paperwork to make sure it has baseline capacity. They usually falls into hands of court, but maybe a couple of days at most. Same thing goes once we get in there and really just look at it. Probably a day or two.
That's right.
This is going to be, so for geology passes, that can take, like, we don't know if it's going to pass it. There are a ton of neighboring watersheds. We have to extend our cross sections out to a ton of different streamlines. Okay. That can take a few days. Okay. It could take longer. So,
yeah, I was just wondering if they could be put into a bucket.
It would be nice to know this ahead of time.
Yeah, just say, hey, this is, for administrative reviews, it's in 10 days. For this, it's 1520 for this, it's X. I'm just thinking, but it sounds like you have to physically get into it before you know.
Yeah,
So we couldn't do that.
yeah, these are certainly on my side, certain categories for sure.
Dave, can you help me understand too, because you said that the majority of these are not being completed in 10 days or less meeting the statute, but the numbers that were pulled together, 129 of them, which is a majority, even when you add all the other groups up, they equal 105. So the
Okay,
department is getting,
then I'm sorry, I misspoke then, Kelly.
no, I just want to make sure I'm reading it right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke. And what part of what I was driving is that, it's the simpler ones that are done most quickly. And if you look at that, that is the lion's share done within 10 days. If you look at the more complicated ones, it's closer to, there's not as many. The percentages are for the more technical, it's not as good. And for the geology reviews, it's less, it's a little more than half that are done within 10 days. So I misspoke when I said that, but that's why I wanted this chart here, because that shows you graphically what the numbers look like. You can see how big the bars are and how far they're spread out.
So it's about 80% of the administrative ones are done within the 10-day, and 53%, are of the geology review ones are done within 10 days, and then 45% of the technical reviews are done within the 10-day.
With that said, though, as you start adding more pumps on and more requests come from more restricted areas, these are going to become more complicated in the future. So this might be the status right now, but all going forward.
Right.
Are there any other questions or suggestions? We will be picking this up at our next models committee meeting. So if anybody wants to join in that discussion, feel free. Okay, if there's nothing else on that topic, I will thank you, Austin, for your help on that. I'll just give a quick summary of what else we've been doing in the models committee. So a couple weeks ago, I sent out a document which I update periodically, which is called Topics for the Models Committee. I sent it to the entire email list that we have for the Models Committee, which includes most of you. But if you don't have a copy of that and you like it, let me know. I'll be glad to send you one. And what I'll do is I'll quickly run through some of the main things that we're working on and just let you know where they're at. So the Michigan Hydrologic Framework and the Michigan Integrated Water Management Database is underway. I'm very, very pleased to be able to say that. So we've had our first work group meeting where we're meeting with the contractors, MSU and USGS, and talking about where they're going. They're at a point in this early part of the process where they need feedback, and they're trying to make sure that what they're going to build is what users are going to want, and that it fits with what we were thinking about and asking to create this thing. So that is underway very, very early in the process, but very happy to have that underway. Two other things that we have the funding for but aren't underway yet are the compiling the key aquifer properties for use in the tool and the 3D glacial aquifer mapping in 2 counties. One of those, the contract has been awarded. The other one, the RFP still needs to be completed. So we have work group assigned to each of those, but they haven't met yet. We need to get things rolling on those. On the stream flow depletion allocations between water management areas, that's a huge topic that we've been very interested in for a long time. And we've been talking a lot about this web squared methodology. We brought that before the council just as to what we're thinking. Well, we're starting to think about something that we're going to have to work on in the models committee to come up with a recommendation. But I think in this year's recommendations, one of the things that we'll want to do is have some kind of study to really dig into stream flow depletion, to better understand it. And that would be a combination of measurements and modeling, that we would choose an area that is very heavily pumped, that there's a lot of large scale irrigation there, and that we would intensively monitor it and we would model it to try to get a good handle on how much stream flow depletion are we actually getting in this area. I think it would be very useful. We're at the very early stages of this concept. We've just had some general discussions about it with some of the members of the committee, but we will be digging into that and trying to work up a proposal which we'll bring back to the full council as one of our recommendations before the end of the year. Let's see here. This SSR technical work group, we are making, I think, good progress. I've told you before, we've given you what topics we're dealing with. We're starting to move through those. Talking about the time limit, that was one of the things. So that came from that work group. So we'll continue to make progress and work through our agenda as we come up with recommendations, which will be a while yet. We'll bring those to the council. And I think that's, yeah.
I was just gonna say, before you move on from the SSR committee, I know one question that I've been hearing from growers is questions about like, how do we determine how Eagle is reviewing and using models in the SSR process? And is there, like, can you talk a little bit about work that either your committee is doing or that Eagle is doing, and maybe the folks who are here from Eagle can chime in on that, to sort of create this pattern of consistency or transparency for, hey, here's how we're using these models, or hey, if someone submits a model, or hey, how are we assessing those in a way that people know what we're doing, that there's a consistent process, and that it's transparent, so that everybody's got an understanding of how that's being done as part of that SSR process.
Yeah, so that is on our agenda as part of this work group, and so we will be addressing that. But I'll let Jim or whoever from the department wants to talk about to just try to explain what's going on now, and we will try to come up with something from this work group that'll more clearly explain and make sure that and the main thing we're trying to look for in a work group is make sure we've got a consistency of understanding between the consultants that are doing a lot of this very detailed modeling work and the department. So that's an important thing that we're trying to do, which I think will help in addressing this question. So Jim, if you or someone else wants to answer Laura's question.
Well,
Yep,
there
Jimmy,
is
got your hand up, so.
there is a slide in the program update that Andy will be giving, summarizing the models that Eagle has received to date and providing some additional updates on that. Further discussion needs to be happening within the models committee.
Is that a good enough answer for right now, Laura? Can you wait till we get to the work group?
Good.
Okay.
Great.
And then one of the things that we've talked about is that we've got a couple of proposals from the 2022 recommendations that we would love to see funded. And if they do get funded in the near future, we would put work groups on those right away and try to move those through as appropriate. So anyway, I did update this topics for models committee. If anybody wants a copy of it, let me know if you haven't already received it, because if you're on my mailing list, you should have received it already. So any questions?
Questions for Dave? All right. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate your update.
Thank you.
All right. New topics committee. And I think we were going to have we kind of had the idea on our agenda to talk about a potential transition for this new topics committee. We got someone who's going to take lead on talking about that. I know Pat's not here, but I didn't know if anybody else on that committee wanted to bring that update. Okay. We will table that until next meeting. Conservation and Efficiency Committee.
Yes,
I'll give the report today and then Emily can chime in if I've missed anything. So we'll start with the 2020 recommendations. Andy, are you slide master? Thank you. Perfect. So we're moving right along with the advancing Michigan's water conservation and efficiency efforts. The project has started. Emily is working with Michael Limo from the chamber to kind of work through those groups and how they're gonna pull information together and get that going. So that is actually huge because for a long time, finding the time and the bandwidth with these folks to be able to come together was a huge problem. So really happy that those stakeholder meetings have started. Recommendation number 2, that we had 4 years ago already, about increasing water conservation and efficiency practices in agriculture. We are super excited to say that MSU Extension has hired both of those folks. So one recently started, and the other one is slated to start later this summer. So MSU Extension has convened or put together their advisory committee. Not yet. They haven't identified the advisory committee.
Not the individuals.
Okay.
They were planning to form that more completely when the second hire occurs.
When they start. Okay, thanks for that clarification, Abby. So we'll wait to see that advisory committee be named, the folks on that to be named. Next slide, Andy. So looking at 2024 recommendations, you are going to hear the same thing from us really. We had some 2022 recommendations that we were like, well, we'd really like to see these. These are still pretty high priority in going back and revisiting them. So one was an ag irrigation pilot project, purchasing a mobile unit that would go out, collect data and like retrofit some of the irrigation systems that are out there to show water savings along with energy savings so that we had data and information to share with farmers that would show them a financial savings and really why they should make those retrofits earlier than what the irrigation companies are currently recommending for that equipment. This pilot program would support what those 2 individuals who were just hired at MSU would be doing and really a data collection. So it would be an additional project. As we got into the weeds a little bit and talking about this, some of the things we learned from getting funding for the 2020 recommendations is that words matter and you need to be specific, right? So who purchases this? Who owns it? Is this a grant? Is this a pay for service? Because all of those different pieces affect the budget for that. And then what happens to the trailer at the end of this project time frame, right? And so the more we looked at it, the more we added a bunch of stuff and then we went back and we're like, oh, I don't even know if that's the right way to go about it. So there's a subcommittee of the subcommittee that's gonna kind of work through that and look. Emily really talked about, and it made a lot of sense, the time frame. So funding for our recommendations isn't guaranteed, and as we all know, it could come later. So if this really is a priority, then we need to look at what grants are available within the next fiscal year, right? That we could put together an application for that would make more sense versus going through the recommendations of the Water Use Advisory Council. So those conversations are happening parallel to the conversation about what does the pilot program itself look like. So I don't know when we'll have a recommendation or if we'll have a recommendation on that. More to come, lots of discussion happening though and good input. There was also discussion about creating a water conservation coordinator position. So managing kind of those between departments, kind of providing technical assistance to getting some of these conservation programs possibly off the ground. I think Emily mentioned that James Clift had an idea of having a grant program that would be available for people to try to implement some conservation practices. That is a possibility for a recommendation, really in its infant stages. And the folks who would really need to put the meat on the bones with that haven't, I don't think have had the opportunity to meet with anything in depth.
And so the water conservation coordinator position would be somebody at OGL or Eagle or MSU?
I think that's very nebulous.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
fair.
very nebulous, yeah. Slide master, next slide, please. Ooh, sorry, one more. Yay, there we go. So continuing through the end of the year, there's been a lot of discussion about the water energy nexus and how do we partner possibly with the EPA Water Sense program, continuing to work with the MMD to identify the different priorities that they have and how do we incorporate water conservation into the energy programs. So it's really interesting the way some of those are worded, like how it's obvious, like water savings should equal energy savings, but how do we fit into some of those programs and do we fit and trying to figure that out. So we're really trying to explore the possibility for leak reduction projects and also show the energy savings as a result of that. So at our last meeting, we also talked about reaching out to agencies, researchers at universities and practitioners that are working in these areas to really understand what are their current priorities, are there research gaps that are out there, and then what is the most up-to-date information on freshwater related topics. So I think there's so much happening out there and all of these different groups. It really is like, we don't need to create the wheel, but are there programs and things that are out there that we could take and give a pathway to funding? So really looking at that. And one of the conversations I think we had in here too was working with the MSU Water
Institute of Water Research.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. And actually they've been out of the country, so we hadn't heard from them, but they just got an email yesterday. They're interested in coming to our August 1st meeting, just to give an overview of their program and what they're doing so that we start to have a better idea of what are they working on type of thing, and where might we find some of those synergies for discussions.
Quick question for you on that, Kelly and Emily. I know that now that Teresa Seidel, who has abandoned us here, is now at the Office of the Great Lakes, or not Office of the Great Lakes, but EPA's Great Lakes National Program Center. She has talked about creating like a dashboard, kind of focused on Western Lake Erie Basin. But I imagine this dashboard is meant to be kind of a, proving ground for something that might be broader across the Great Lakes. She may be a good person to reach out to in the idea of you guys kind of trying to get a sense of where we are with everything going on water related in the Great Lakes, that she may have some ideas or some resources or information or other things that EPA is working on as part of that too.
Good suggestion. Thank you. Written that down.
I just had
the
a-
last couple.
Oh,
Go ahead,
sorry. Do
Emily.
we have another slide? Sorry, I just had some clarifying points, but I can wait till you're finished.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to the last few bullets here at the end. So, looking at research projects, like I said, to determine trends in water use. The last time we reported how we felt it would be important to at least mention climate migration and some of the things that the legislative body or this group should be considering. And we're not going to have a recommendation on it, but feel like the topic is important enough to mention that. And Emily, I think Andy, you were working on inviting some of the folks from USGS to come and talk to our group about some of the climate migration impacts and just things that would be good for us to know, land and water use issues. Okay, that's all I have unless there are questions or Emily would like to clarify anything.
So just a couple things I wanted to clarify. First, the concept for creating a pilot grant funding program to support implementation of water conservation BMPs in areas of potential high water demand or water stress. That is in concept and would need to be sort of further fleshed out with some of our other recommendations that are focused on agriculture. So when we were talking about the concept of a water conservation efficiency coordinator, that would be within state government that could help identify opportunities for Michigan to advance its water conservation efficiency program and potentially serve as the grant administrator for a small pilot grant program, and then also help just provide technical assistance to water sectors and different types of BMPs that could be implemented and support a lot of the work that the committee has been trying to do. So that's all still in sort of a very conceptual stage. In terms of the comment you made, Kelly, about funding for the WUAC, part of what we talked about in our committee meeting last week is just with the lag time, some of these, when the funding becomes available, some of the programs, especially the home energy audit programs or other energy programs that we're looking at to see where there's water conservation efficiency opportunities to tie water into them. The lag time and the uncertainty around the legislature appropriating funds makes it such that we can't really put that into a recommendation for 2024 to be able to take advantage of those opportunities to pair it with the home energy audit programs that'll be rolling out in the fall. So in some situations, timing wise, for things that we've been discussing as a committee, if they're paired with other types of programs and funding sources, it doesn't align with the legislative process for taking action and appropriating funds for WUAC. So we're looking at different ways to fund these activities and different opportunities. In terms of the research, the broader sort of freshwater related topics, that's something that our office is going to be working on. The specific area that the committee has been discussing is related to climate migration and what that may look like in the future for Michigan in terms of where our population moving within the state, even if we're not growing by numbers. How our land use is changing, how is water use changing, how are water use sectors changing within the geography of the state. And so we had some discussion last week about kind of framing this out as a research question for a U of M master's project and possibly having a team of master's students start to look at some of the existing research and data that's out there. But there's a lot of research that's happening, and I think the committee's just been trying to figure out how do we get our arms around it? How do we inform the work that we're doing? And it's a little bit bigger than just the committee. So those are just some of the comments that I wanted to mention. And I think we don't have another committee meeting until August. So we're just trying to be really mindful of the fact that we have a lot of existing projects underway that we need to commit our time and resources to and think about what makes sense to put forward from the committee as a recommendation that might bring more funding for projects. So we may have one that we put forward, but timing wise. And then in terms of the mobile lab recommendation, we had a lot of discussion last week as a committee that was our 2022 recommendation that we've been considering and revising. But we have the 2 irrigation specialists for the funded 2020 recommendation that's supposed to look at strategies for enhancing agricultural water conservation efficiency. And we don't have those recommendations from that overall project yet. So we're just questioning whether we're putting the cart before the horse in terms of funding, recommending a project that would support a specific action when we don't have the overarching roadmap yet. So those are just a few comments I want to add, maybe more than a few.
Thanks, Emily. Any questions for Kelly or Emily for Conservation and Efficiency Committee?
Make a comment, and I would say I really appreciate that idea of maybe pursuing some climate migration and change research. It's really important to everything that this group does, and I think it took me at least 10 years to slowly catch on that a lot of the large volume of large quantity requests was partially driven by climate change, driving agricultural practice change. And when I still speak to a lot of our members and say, oh yeah, there's been over 5,000, new large quantity, it doesn't match up because people don't see like a dramatically different or giantly increased amount of farm fields. But the subtlety of how we're using water based on some of those changes that happened 15 years ago or started happening is really a lot of what we do here is dealing with that. So doing it again, doing it now is not just a chance for some of the water conservation and efficiency, but it's as we're grappling to kind of deal with stuff set in motion 15 or 20 years ago, pretty powerful to look ahead 20 years and maybe make some guesses of what we're going to be dealing with and where next, so that we can try to be as much in front of it this time as possible. So I commend you guys for picking up on that and your work towards it.
Yeah, and I think we recognize this is much bigger than just the committee. It's really something that, affects the overall council and how we think about what does water use demand look like going into the future. And there's a lot of work happening in this space. And so we're going to have one of our student interns this summer start to do some work to understand what our research priorities are within the agencies, but then also what current research is being done across the region in this area, and then help us put together a concept for a master's project that could be an 18-month project at U of M and kind of dig into this. And also, we get a lot of outreach from different organizations and water centers and institutions wanting to know what our research priorities are. And so maybe that's something the council should think about. Is there, do we have a list of research priorities that we would want to collaborate with partners on or inform their research priorities? So we're starting to dip into this in the committee as part of our speaker series, but recognizing that we could do a convening and bring all of these researchers together, and maybe that's the direction we'll head. But there's a lot to learn and a lot of work happening in this area.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Doug, do we have anything to update for the implementation committee?
No, we have not met since April. We'll have to reconvene a meeting here in the near future.
Yep, so implementation is, we're planning on gearing up for, I think, doing a lot similar process that we did for 2020 and 2022, which is to kind of collect rough drafts of recommendations from each of the committees, put it all together into a report so that the whole council can take a look at it, make sure you're good with the language, and make sure you're good with the recommendations so that we're in time for December. So we'll definitely be starting to work on that throughout the fall. As a quick reminder, we are planning on kind of at least getting an idea of what everybody, you don't have to have the whole thing written out, an idea of what everybody's planning on including for recommendations in our August meeting, just so that we can kind of get our heads wrapped around what's this report going to look like versus what are we going to say? Hey, please, legislature, let's finish up what we've already started and already are asking for, in order to be able to move on to these next steps too. So we'll be continuing to work on that.
I guess to Kelly's point, and I think Jim Milne might have mentioned this or James Cliff, but when we do recommendations, let's get into the nitty gritties as far as the details, as far as what is kind of what Kelly just said, who's going to own it, who's going to maintain it, how's this going to be procured. And I think those were some big things that the department said last time too, is, hey, okay, we got these recommendations approved when we did have funding, but they're caught kind of vague. We need to really dive into that. So that's just a reminder.
Questions for Doug or for me? All right. So I have on our agenda, the next item being nomination of officers and committee chairs. It sounds like we may still need to hold off on, at the very least, on committee chairs, because we haven't heard a lot of responses from folks who, in terms of their interest in being on those committees. But I'll ask, do people feel comfortable with moving ahead for the portion of this to look at, in terms of who we want to make sure is represented on kind of the executive group, which are, you could call us the official cat herders, to, basically setting up the agendas for the meetings. And then what do you guys want for the structure of our chairs? We've been operating on a tri-chair basis so that we can kind of have, you know, sort of the major groups represented as chairs. We're not required by the statute to do it that way. So if somebody's got a really strong feeling that they want to change that, they certainly can bring it up. Otherwise, do you guys feel comfortable moving forward with, at least for the full council, executive committee and chairs, or do you want to wait on that for everybody to kind of get that email and update their interest levels? What do people think?
I think as far as organizational development goes, the tri-chair piece works really well because everybody here is fully committed to other things, right? This is one more thing and it spreads some of that burden across 3 people, right? So if someone needs to be gone, they don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I'm derailing this statewide council because I can't attend because I have to do my job. So personally, for organization, right, I like the tri-chair. I mean, others can throw that out there. I would like a little bit of an explanation about how the structure when it comes to executive committee, because and I could have been the one to miss it, honestly, but I don't know that there was ever communication. All of a sudden, there was just talk like, oh, now there's an executive committee. So how did that come about? What is the role of the executive committee? Because I think the way it's currently set up is, to me, it's weird. We can look at how organizations are developed and how leadership operates. So I think having a better understanding of the way it's currently set up would help me.
That's a good question. So the executive committee was something that was set up when we had the council restructured under the 2018 statute. We needed to have a group that was going to basically convene to plan the agendas and to bring forward any specific requests, you know, that we're hearing from council members on, hey, this group wants to talk about this at the next council meeting. And so that's basically their role is to plan the agendas, to try to coordinate stuff like, hey, who's going to reach out to these legislators to say, please give us money? Hey, how do we want to convey to the rest of the council members, you know, this important topic, or hey, this article came out, or, you know, these are things that need to come forward. It's never been a formal structure. It's never been something that's been like a super private, like you have to have a handshake and a special pin or any of that kind of stuff. It's really just been who kind of wants to dig into the nitty gritty of planning out, you know, the meetings and what the council's going to do.
And that's the executive committee?
So it's the tri-chairs plus a few other people.
Who are the other people? Like,
so it's Dave Hamilton's on it, Dave Maturin's on it. We've got Chris and James from Eagle on it. What's on my list? And yes, and that's been one of the big questions is, at least from a continuity perspective, is that Pat's had an interest in coming, you know, and moving off the committee. He's got a replacement coming in, but that person may not be comfortable with stepping in as the tri-chair, as you know, as Pat's been kind of filling in since Brian Eggers retired. So, you know, so that's one of those roles that is still kind of up in the air a little bit.
I was only gonna add for you that, you know, even when this body was originally created under a different name, I mean, like going way back, it's pretty, I'm getting fuzzy on all of it because it's been a long time. I stepped in and was not part of the very, very first one that predated the statute. It was like the groundwater conservation.
I think.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then there was one in statute that functioned for, I think, about a year and a half, got some short-term duties that the statute called out done. That got done away with by an executive order. Then we went through a very long period where we were formulated under Eagle as an advisory committee to Eagle. Saw that there was still continuing need, even though the statute, that part of the statute didn't call for it anymore. And now, of course, we've been reformalized in statute. The governance requirements of the council aren't really a whole lot in statute. So it's really kind of up to the group with what works. when you asked that, I was trying to think back in my memory if I had a clear answer on why there is an executive committee that's slightly larger than the co-chairs, and I don't think I have perfect recall. So I'd only tell you that, you know, I've been participating for 17 years. And there's been a lot of different people on the whole body, a lot of different people that have served as chairs, executive committees. And I'm guessing at some point, it was probably a decision to broaden things a little bit. We couldn't make more co-chairs because we already have as many co-chairs as anybody has ever had for a body. But we kind of recognize there are some people who brought slightly different voices into it, different levels of involvement or engagement that could help. And pretty much, you know, my entire time, nobody's wanted to seemingly like, you know, keep agendas under control in the sense that like, hey, we don't want to talk about that. It's kind of been as many people in the room as want to talk about, like, we need to talk about this, this, and this is coming up. Hey, we heard, you know, we all look at our meeting minutes from the last meeting and say, hey, so somebody wanted more time about that. And I think from a co-chair perspective, we've appreciated extra involvement in that. So I think the practice continues. And I don't know if I can really put my finger on memory of the moment where there was an explicit discussion about the XCOM versus chairs working on it. It's just kind of has been, and there's still value in it. So we proceed, but it's a good moment in time to realize and recognize that in the statute, there's not a prescription on what type of governance structure we have to have. As long as it works and people perceive it working and functioning to be productive and equitable to everybody that's involved.
And for those, the executive committee is also formulated, once we're no longer advisory to Eagle, we had to have, traditionally, the tri-chairs have not included Eagle. So the executive community has always integrated Eagle into that because they administer the program. So I think they had to, that's one way that we formulated. One of the reasons we have it is to have that process.
Yeah, we provide all of the support.
Exactly.
In the notes, in the logistics, and I don't know, I have no history like the rest of you, except when the program was transferred to my section, I was put here, so. Anyway.
So for those who hadn't had a chance to see the email yet, that's actually one of the committees that Bree asked about folks who are interested in serving on it. So not only our standing kind of work committees, but also the executive committee. You know, if you like herding cats and you like planning agendas.
It's extra meetings, it's extra meetings.
How often do you guys meet?
Usually once before each council meeting.
2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks before.
So it's 6 additional.
Yep, and the agendas have to be published 10 days prior to the meeting, so it's a lot of like dates, so if you're game, welcome aboard.
Yeah, so like I said, if we want to try to do any nominations or voting on any chair positions, officers, any of that stuff, I'm gonna turn the agenda over to Chris. So that we're not running the part of the agenda where people might be voting for or against us. Otherwise, if you guys don't feel comfortable moving forward with that, because you want another chance to review Bree's email and respond to it, this is something we can table for next meeting. What do you guys think?
Why don't we table for the next meeting and one more shot for Bree's communication?
You guys comfortable with that?
Will we have a good idea of past placement?
Pat,
Taking the
we
position.
spoke with Pat. Pat is graciously willing to continue serving as co-chair. He's also communicated that he's glad to step aside. He's trying to, get his alternate ready to go. But again, that doesn't necessarily assume that person will be a nominee in the short term. He's willing to continue serving. I would say this, we put people on any committee they want to be on. And, all of us put people who are not on this council on the committees if they say they want to participate in the committees. So we don't ever need to really vote or never have about just being engaged and participating in committees. I think we did technically ask for approval of committee chair positions.
Yep.
Executive committee and the co-chair positions. So those are the key ones. We're okay if we want to take more time, but we've been cognizant for, I don't know, about 8 meetings now that it's taken forever to kind of get appointments finalized. We've kept saying, hey, one day when we get through the appointments, we should redo our governance structure formally. We sent out some requests for nominations and we have a quorum. So we said, if we want to do all of them, some of them this meeting, we're okay. If people want a little bit more time, let's be honest, we've been functioning. You get the default until you elect otherwise. I think we're way into our next term using the default. So it's really what the pleasure of the group is, what feels right.
Yeah, one issue I would like to bring up is that, to the best of my knowledge, there still hasn't been a local government representative appointed to this body by the Speaker of the House. I continue to serve in that role, but for some reason, there seems to be a glitch in getting that new person. So one of the concerns I would have is just to make sure that a local government representative is either on as a co-chair like Pat currently is, or is at minimum on the executive committee. But if Pat is willing to continue in his current role as co-chair, then I would be fine with moving ahead with the, the approval of the co-chairs at this time. But just a concern in general about finalizing that local government representative.
So to your knowledge, there hasn't.
Well, I was going to save this for public comment, okay. But we might as well address it while we're on it. Yeah, I had indicated like over a year ago that I didn't want to be reappointed. And my understanding was, the speaker had 4 appointments, one of those being the local government representative. I think early on, he had made some appointments, but there was some hiccup with the names and the organizations. And I'm not sure exactly where all this is at, but I think most of that has been ironed out with the exception of the local government representative. So I guess I would just urge the co-chairs and maybe the department to try to work with the Speaker Tate's office to try to get that finalized as soon as possible. Again, I'm willing to hang on here for a little bit longer, but it is harder and harder to make these meetings in person because I'm often not in the area this time of year.
Yeah.
So,
Tom, do you have a successor or someone in mind? Or has the township submitted anybody to the speaker's office?
To my knowledge, they haven't. I was kind of assuming maybe that person might come from the municipal side, but I don't really know for sure.
I think that's the key is if we don't have an existing nominee that's been sent to Speaker Tate's office, that's probably why they haven't moved forward with that, is because they don't have any recommendations for who to serve as a nominee. So that might be the next necessary step is to figure out who should be nominated as that local government representative for Speaker Tate to be able to consider.
Picture, and here I was thinking we finally got all the appointments.
Well, I think all but one.
You're not gonna pull a Lyndon Johnson, if nominated, I won't run, if elected, I won't serve, whatever.
Yeah, I think I am.
I'm been very gracious.
We're not accepting it.
Right.
You can't retire, Tom.
Well, I actually retired 3 years ago and I don't feel like I can adequately represent local government, not knowing what's all going on in local government compared to state government these days. But I have, continued to sit on the conservation committee and attended these meetings by Zoom, but it really is time to get a local government representative in place, so.
So Tom, is that something that you would pack and coordinate on figuring out who your nominee might be for local government representative? Or is that something that you need some assistance with, or?
Well, I probably need assistance because when I did bring this to, well, let me put this carefully here. When I did bring this to MTA's attention, I don't believe they perceived that their nominee might be taken seriously by the current speaker. So probably need assistance.
I would ask, this question, if I can. Does everybody feel like they saw the request for nominations? And I know like maybe for committees, we might have to twist some arms, see if on that one, do people feel like you saw it and that the names of people interested in serving as like co-chairs or executive committee members at least made it in? I've been hands off, so I don't have the list. Exactly.
I didn't look at the list. Cause I really wanted to know more about like, what is the executive committee and how do those things work together? So.
I kind of feel like we're at a spot where we need a little bit more time. We still don't know who Pat's replacement is. We need to work with Tom on a local government's representative. Some folks haven't had much of a chance to look through the email.
Does that feel right to everybody?
My recommendation is to hold this till August.
Oh, good. August.
Any strong objections to that?
No objection. I just have a question. Sorry. So I've seen the emails come through with requests for, like, if you want to be nominated for a co-chair. Are you suggesting we've been provided the names of people who responded to that?
No, not yet.
No,
That
okay.
was, if called for today and we're ready, I was gonna ask Christine and to tell you what
Okay,
the current list of input on nominations are.
okay. And that's what we're tabling for the next meeting. Got it. Thank you. Bree's been sending out kind of reminders and, because we haven't had a real great response.
Yeah, and Bree, maybe with this next email, you can send out the responses you've received so far for nominees. And that way folks know who's kind of put their hat in the ring for various positions. So that way they can say, oh, this committee clearly needs a co-chair. I want to do that. Or boy, I'm tired of that jerk, being one of the tri-chairs. Do it instead. We're always open to that. Which was part of why we wanted to turn this part of the meeting over to Chris, was so you guys would not think that we are the forever dictators of the Water Use Advisory Council.
That sounds like a good name change.
The forever dictator?
Yeah.
The
3 forever dictators. Forget tri-chairs.
All right. Well, without any strong objections, I'm not seeing anybody online popping up. Let's table this till August. We'll send out the email again, requesting folks to nominate. We'll make sure and get the list out there of folks who have already put their name in so far. So you can see, kind of what your choices are at this point. We'll update that list before the next Water Use Advisory Council meeting for any new folks who come in who say, hey, I want to be, chair, co-chair, executive committee, whatever. So we've got the full list and everybody's got the information they need so that we can be ready to vote next time. Okay? All right, awesome. On that case, I will turn the agenda over to Brian.
Move into the Eagle update. We'll let Eagle have at it and then we'll make sure to talk about the auditor's report a bit after.
Yeah, auditor's report and Dave, if you don't mind, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind with giving an update, because you've been doing great work. So I want the rest of the council to be able to hear it too.
I was gonna hold that and we'll do that a bit in the open comments.
Open
section.
comments? Okay.
Right, so time for the main event here, and the auditor's report is addressed during the program update here, so stay tuned. First thing on the update from the water use program is MyEnviro update. So MyEnviro, if you're not familiar, it's the states where Eagles permitting system, online permitting system and database. It's used by the Air Quality Division and Water Resources Division. And so just as of yesterday, actually, the Part 327 water withdrawal permit applications has been brought up to modern times and went live into the MyEnviro online system. It used to be an old fashioned PDF form that folks would download off our website and a little bit more difficult to track, but now it's got the full capabilities of MyEnviro, which is it's a big system, but it's got all kinds of momentum and use in the other water and air programs. Not all the water programs are in there, or different portions of the programs, but we're starting to creep in there. Including like complaints, official, formal, I guess, complaints that might be related to a Part 327 violation. They were technically available in that MyEnviro system previously, but also as of yesterday. So next up is what's already been talked about in the models committee here earlier by Dave Hamilton, 2020 recommendations. He mentioned that some revisions to the grant agreement for both of these projects are being undertaken right now. And then also the transition probability mapping for Cass and Calhoun counties. That draft work plan is being drawn up under review currently now. There's project meetings between Bonner Engineering and Eagle beginning. Next up, the groundwater data management system. So the contractor has been selected for this. It's EarthSoft is the name of the contractor. Their software, I'm sure you pronounce that, Equus or what have you, system, which their website claims is the world's most widely used environmental data management system. They've been selected for this. The contract's been signed. And project kickoff meeting that hasn't quite been scheduled yet. Next up, as you probably are getting used to, you frequent visitors here is an Aqua Bounty update. You've got an aquaculture facility that's just across the state line in Ohio. That as of right now, so we do have some property access agreements signed. USGS and Eagle have got that accomplished to get monitoring wells drilled. To be able to access the property for ongoing measurements to take those monitoring wells. That drilling is actually scheduled to start this week. I assume it has, otherwise. I think there's 6 wells to be drilled at 3 different sites, something along those range. I could be off, but they're starting drilling this week to get those monitoring constructed. That's so that's the map. You might have shared it before, the fried egg on your plate map. That's basically the state line, Ohio, Michigan state line runs right through the center of the map there, and the Aqua Bounty facility being just to the south there, and just showing you the proposed monitoring well locations. And the fried egg is the 10-year, or I'm sorry, the 10-foot, 5-foot, and 1-foot groundwater level drawdown contours, more or less. It's been modeled for that project, and I think it's a 5.25 MGD. Water use that they'd be pulling out of wells, groundwater, and the discharge into the east branch of the St. Joe River. So pulling out groundwater, discharge of surface water. So that's there. Moving quickly, so depleted water management areas. This list and the map that will follow here on the next slide is exactly the same as it was back in April. No changes here. So as of right now, as of June, you see that I think it's 14 or so water management areas that are in the negative in terms of water availability, gallons per minute of stream flow depletion available. The reason why it's a negative on the right side there. Some recent activity going on with that though is 2 new gates that have been installed in Dickinson Creek and Osborne Drain. Those have been installed recently, and there's 3 additional gauges planned. I'm not sure the dates when they be installed for the USGS gauges, funding agreement, and so forth. Yeah, so moving on from that, that is the map where those things are located. I should slow down and let anyone, of course, feel free to jump in with questions at any time. And just sort of a review about what
was the map you were just on? I'm sorry,
Yeah, that's like the 14 water management areas that are in that negative status. So they're the depleted status. It's kind of how they're situated. There. And then the sort of the regulatory implications for that zone D status probably goes without saying that no, new registration can be like automatically passed, you know, that you're not gonna pass the water withdrawal assessment tool in the area or in a neighboring watershed that might impact, maybe predicted to impact that's a new watershed. Same story for if request that comes through the water withdrawal assessment tool that would require a site-specific review, or unable to authorize any of those requests in water management areas, or that would be likely to impact those water management areas. That doesn't impact the, if there's sort of that baseline capacity trade for old withdrawals that might be transferred or moved over to a new withdrawal. That story, if you're all familiar with that, obviously those can still continue. So initial response actions, this may be review again, you know, what the department's going to do or is doing when a watershed water management area comes up as that zone D status or negative status. You know, the confirmation, the intent of these things, the intention is to try and get a confirmation on, is there a change in the index flow? You know, that's the statutory definition of an adverse resource impact is index flow used to be higher and now it's lower. So installing stream gauges if possible, and then also doing the discrete or miscellaneous stream flow measurements. Obviously you're out in the stream taking a point in time measurement. Those are the first initial response actions, just try and establish that stream flow record to try and catch it. You know, a time machine would be ideal here to go back and figure out what those flows were perhaps before, long term. But the sooner the better to try and get a handle on what's trying to do.
Oh, what is the time frame? So my guess is the stream gauges that USGS has put in is in some of these areas, right? And so is it, you said a point in time, right? So is it year-long monitoring for those? Like, can you give me an idea of, obviously some of these, we don't have past data, as you said, time machine. How long into the future before we have an actual way to understand, is there an adverse impact happening?
Yeah.
Is there a definition for that?
No, definitely not. Great question. There would be no hard and fast rule on that. First, so I think it might have been two questions there, Kelly. First would be like the timing of the two stream flow monitoring things. So stream gauges, that would be a year round. They might get impacted by ice at times or something like that, but year round implementation of an instrument in the stream that just continuously records and becomes part of USGS's real-time stream flow data network. The miscellaneous stream flow measures, those are the point in time ones. That's where, you know, whenever our staff kind of goes on a rotating basis, or USGS also, we're kind of contracted with them to do these miscellaneous flow measurements also, where you're kind of rotating around. Those are usually done during the summer low flow period. That's probably the most critical period. Certainly that is for an adverse resource impact detection if it were to happen. So that August would be the key month for sure, but any kind of low flow period during summer would be important. But measurements taken outside that period are still, they're not useless. They still add to a stream flow record that you might compare to other gauged locations. And that's a lot of what we might do with these miscellaneous stream flow measurements as compared to other similar, hopefully nearby and similar geology and so forth, gauged locations, kind of trying to quarter. So that's more or less the process that's usually done to establish an index flow, is like looking at the nearby gauges. So I think that's that. And then, yeah, the harder question, which I'm tempted to just dodge completely, would be like, you know,
That's fair.
right? You know, how do you know when? So, just like speaking as a total moron. So you would want to have a long enough period of record where you hopefully catch wet years, dry years, and lots of average years. Like that would be the easiest, simplest answer. Like you're trying, you want to. What we're looking for is trying to establish or potentially change the median flow. So you kind of need to capture all the different climate factors that might be happening on the streams, on the streams flow record. So really difficult to answer. think, if I remember right, when index flows were first established for the water withdrawal assessment tool, the gauges were eliminated from the model that like predicted index flow for all the streams in the state. It used like 147 gauges, and the ones that didn't make the cut, if they didn't have at least 20 years of continuous record. So that's a pretty high bar. Of course, I don't think that would necessarily be the case. That's going to be required for this going forward, but that was sort of the standard that was set to try and use to be able to establish what is like a representative index flow.
I think you answered the impossible question really well,
All right.
actually.
Hang on a second. Maybe.
I knew it.
Dave Hamilton has his hand raised. But Dave,
Surprise, surprise. So the comment I want to make is that this is a very difficult question. It's a very, very important one. And it's one that Jim Milne a couple years ago came to the Models Committee and asked for our help to look at this. And we've agreed that we would like to work with the department. I think it would be good to work through a couple of these. There's a lot of data that's been collected. There's a lot of questions. You know, as Andy was saying, that there's a long history as to, you know, what data has been used, what data hasn't been used, and in the meantime, more data has been collected. So there's a lot of things that we could look at, and I think we should. And I think we need to be able to settle on that, you know, how much information do we need? What does it look like to make a determination? And I think the department needs to make some determinations, and we're willing to help with that, to work out that process with the department, the Models Committee is.
thanks. I'll add to a little bit is, the data committee would be interested too. This has pretty good overlap with some stuff that's been on our list for a long time, that came into play with like the miscellaneous measurements. And, you know, if you go out and you collect, you get the right timing, sequence, base flow, you get 4 points, 5 points, USGS standards. At what point do we say, hey, you know, it's convincing enough to change the index flow prediction in the system? And we've never really gotten to that point of what is enough. And we've had some pretty good discussions too about, well, we can't wait like 10 years worth of data collection to do it. So, you know, do we calibrate it using other gauges to come up with like, hey, this year then that we measured was at other gauges 20%, you know, wetter than the median concept at those gauges? And is there like an adjustment so you don't actually have to wait 10 years of data collection or something like that? So this kind of, you know, very similar. And we'd be glad to participate too, because we still want to kind of hit that same type of data subject. I think you actually answered really good. It's kind of complicated. And I appreciate that Eagle's trying to answer that question for themselves, like what's enough evidence for them. And, you know, the short version I would say is that it's weird legally because it's the ARIs are defined as predicted impact levels. Anybody can rebut, but you have to have a preponderance of evidence, which I used to think casually that meant like a lot. It means 51% more, most convincing of an argument. And so you can get kind of tied up into like what might be the legal, but I think taking on a practical approach and saying what is, you know, reasonable and robust to get an extra level of confidence that you're seeing something. But it's really hard. Flow data is noisy. There's a huge amount of variability for a lot of reasons. And so just measuring something like that implicitly, like trying to collect empirical and see if this true trend obscured by a lot of different types of noises and data, seeing if you can actually convince yourself. It's challenging. It's what statistics are for, but it's still challenging. So thank you for your efforts moving forward with it, and know that you got a couple of committees that would love to help take it.
Yeah, so along that same vein, you know, possible future response actions. So groundwater data collection, those things listed there. Obviously, the reason for those would be to hopefully inform a groundwater surface water interaction model, right? So data that might be fed into a model that will confirm or hopefully verify what the effects of water withdrawals might be on stream flows. So that's something that obviously we've talked about not gonna say ad nauseum, but it's never gonna go away. That is, it's like, it becomes the constant thing. And this one here was throwing, statistical analysis of stream flow. I'd probably argue I'd say this is a required, this would not be a possible future response action. Statistical analysis of the stream flow record, I think is gonna be required, basically. And then, yeah, throwing out, a question and opportunities for all listening and available is maybe some special research projects, joint, private, public, university funded, to try and answer these very, very difficult questions. Next up is the groundwater models. We had the question earlier about what Eagle does with those. So 3 that I'm aware of and that are on my slide in front of me here provided for me, that have ever been provided to Eagle at all. So that it's not like these things come in frequently. But so Dickinson Creek, this is our current review in progress. The one we're actively still working on. I know it's been a while. Go faster, but we're still digging into that. So it's under process. Dickinson Creek and Calhoun County, kind of between Marshall and Battle Creek there, where that is one of the watersheds that is one of the depleted water management areas. It's in the negative status. It previously withdrawals there previously got a bedrock pass when the water withdrawal assessment tool used to give you sort of a free pass if you just hit the bedrock button. That was a mistake for us to have, for the water withdrawal assessment tool to have that. Water withdrawals from the bedrock in this area can be quite likely to be connected to service. So that review is still ongoing, under process right now. And then the other 2 being the Cass County pilot study. Big deal there, big one, and then Fawn River in St. Joseph County. Both of these are kind of in similar status where there are technical issues where these models can't just be used at this time to plug in place of the water withdrawal assessment tool and make predictions on stream flow impact from water withdrawals. So they're not to that stage yet. They do need some additional work to kind of get them fixed, or whatever is a much better word than being a moron, better word than fixed. But those are kind of stalled at this point. And I think had 1 meeting on the Cass County pilot study to get that free up and going, but it's sort of sat there stagnant since that time. So we're very willing, eager, and hopefully get those discussions going on both those so they can be sort of fully utilized.
Can I ask before you move on, Andy, like what help do you guys need? And Dave, I know with your committee's involvement with this, like what's the next step? What do you guys need to be able to move forward on, I guess, particularly the Cass County model, because that's kind of a bigger scale. Like it's not dealing with a specific site-specific review that you guys are working through your process, but knowing that one was done from the perspective of let's really do a deep dive into several watersheds together. What needs to happen next for that?
I'll start with just like a one sentence answer and then hopefully turn it over to Dave or whomever. But so some issues have been identified on what might make that model better, or both those models better. Again, using my dumb language here. What might improve those models? So I think those are out, and then so the next steps would be having time and resources available to maybe make some changes to them.
We have Jim Milton and then Todd Feenstra.
Well, just noting, as noted on the slide there for Cass County pilot study, both Eagle and USGS reviewed the Cass County pilot study model and identified issues with the model. And when Jim Nicholas was co-chair, a work group was formed to meet to address some of the issues with the model. And that, to the best of my knowledge, that work group met once and hasn't met since then. So Eagle remains committed to, should another work group be formed to address the issues, Eagle would be happy to participate in that work group.
Thank you, Jim. Todd.
Yeah, I'm gonna apologize ahead of time. They're doing some construction in the office above mine. So if you hear some of the noises coming down, we are actually the authors of all 3 of those models. The Fawn River was done back in I believe, 2017. And that's had no work done on it at all since the initial review came back from the USGS on that. The Cass County pilot model, we were going through a bunch of review stuff and addressing that. Back when Jim Nicholas was there, Lena Pappas actually came down to my office this year, and we talked about revising that as well. So she got a look at it here and was brought up to speed. But then she got sidetracked and busy on a number of other things. And I did not push forward on that model because we had already submitted another model in 2021 for the Dickinson Creek. And that model review's been going on for about 3 years now, and that's part of an SSR. So they've been piling up on each other, and I think we're getting closer to resolving some of the issues, and we're adding additional simulations and additional data and trying to hammer through a lot of stuff. But those are a really slow process. If we think it's difficult to go through an SSR with the 2D analytical models, it's exponentially more difficult when we do a 3D flow model. So from my perspective, I'd like to see resolution on the Dickinson Creek first because it's the smallest and the easiest one, I think, to resolve. And then Lena and I did have a good discussion about the Cass model and what she would like to see done with that. And we had some good direction. I still got the notes on that. Happy to start working on that again once Dickinson Creek is resolved. And then I would say on the backmost burner. Sorry, they're cutting the floor out above me here, sounds like.
All right, you still sound good.
But on the probably the backmost burner would be the Fawn River model. But all three of them are definitely viable models. All three of them, ever since we built the model and before, we've been collecting data, and that data has been continuous ever since. So we've got the ability not only to calibrate the models, but also verify them through time. And we did address all the parameters that Andy had up on a slide before with aquifer testing, stream bed connectivity, in the field work that was needed to go into those. So, and I believe all those models also have some stream gauges. Part of the problem with the Dickinson Creek one was when the model was completed, the Dickinson Creek stream gauge at that time only had 3 or 4 months of data. So it wasn't even applicable when we built the model. But of course, now after 3 years, now we may have some additional data to put into that from that gauge. So I know Lena and I believe Ross were out there last week, last week, I believe, to check our numbers on stream bed conductance. So I know it's moving forward, but it's taken a long time. It's taken a real long time. So, but they're difficult issues to get into, and even talking for 5 minutes, I'm not even touching hardly on the things and the discussions that were raised as far as technical on those 3D flow models.
Thank you, Todd. Go ahead, Jim.
And just a further clarification with respect to the Fawn River model. That model was given to DEQ at the time that funding was joint state. Private funding was developed to do the Cass County pilot study model. And DEQ received a copy of the Fawn River model, and USGS did review that and identified issues. But to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of any proposed large quantity withdrawals that have proposed or cited the Fawn River model in support of those proposed large quantity withdrawals.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jim. None of those models have been used in site-specific reviews, none of them yet. And so what we keep talking about is, can we get them to a place where both Eagle and USGS are comfortable using the model? I will say we did have out-of-state experts do peer review. I paid for those to be done. And so we've got review from multiple different places with multiple different opinions. So it's a hard issue. There's technical things and there's several people that we've got to satisfy as far as the technical side goes. It's a pretty limited group that understand the 3D flow modeling and the hydrogeology. They're definitely not easy, and these are regional models at a regional scale. These are not just individual well fields. So they're complex. There's no question about it. And part of the big challenge is getting everybody in the room and everybody who's reviewing it to a level where they're comfortable that the model is reasonable and representative. And even that definition is vague and relies on professional judgment. So it's going to take some time to work through it, but I fully expect that's the future. I fully expect this is the direction things are going to have to go, is the 3D flow modeling to really address all the complexities with stream flow depletions. It's my personal opinion, professional opinion. So it's just going to be something we're going to have to keep banging our heads against for a while.
Thank you.
For the Cass County and Fawn River pilots, I guess what were we piloting? Like, what was the question that was trying to be answered, or was it just to create a tool that then could be picked up and
There was three purposes delineated for that pilot project. One was data collection. So some raw data on streams, groundwater, aquifer testing, et cetera. The second one is to test methodologies of testing. So we tested out running aquifer systems with pivot systems, open discharge. We were testing methodologies for stream bed conductance. The three tested were slug test, grain size, and vertical tube seepage meters. And the idea was to create some protocols or some procedures at least that would be acceptable by all the parties, that could then be, those techniques could be transferred to other areas in the state. And the third and final product was supposed to be, for the CAS in particular, the final product articulated in the documents in the agreement was that we would have a working 3D flow model that could be used, if we could get there, that could be used in site-specific reviews to cover 5 of the watersheds that were delineated in Cass County. So there was 3 goals, 3 purposes to that project. So data collection, developing some procedures and testing multiple different procedures, and then developing a 3D flow model.
Yes. Andy, take it over again. Get going.
Buddy's out there with a question.
Buddy's got a question.
All right, we'll do one more and then I'll let you keep going. Buddy, go ahead.
On the Dickinson Creek model, do you think, and I'm asking Eagle and Todd, that the real world situation is changing faster than Eagle can keep up with it, with the abandoning of many wells in that area because of the new Ford plant, and actually in the adjacent watershed with all the solar panels going in, I'll bet you there's, without a doubt, 15 to 20 large quantity wells that are being abandoned. And also with the Dickinson Creek, there was a golf course that had an old withdrawal that's not there anymore. It's not drawn out of the creek. Both you can comment.
I can address that, actually, since I'm working on the project.
You might need to speak up, Lena.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
even having a hard time hearing you. I'm
I'm
sorry.
behind this computer. It's actually like reflecting the noise back at me, so I'll move that out of the way. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was actually the first thing that we did, is we went through and we made sure that all of the withdrawals that were active or not active were, updated in the system, so that we would have a accurate depiction of the current setting administratively, what was going on out there in Dickinson Creek. So, we were on the golf course, a couple of the stream flow locations we actually took out there in the last couple of weeks. We're in the golf course, so we're aware that it's inactive.
Thank you.
I'm gonna let that go and you can keep on with the Eagle update.
All right, yep. Next portion is about the water use program audit that was completed by the Office of Auditor General. If you're not familiar, that office, it's an independent agency that performs oversight of all different state programs. And they basically just kind of rotate through, I don't know how on earth they keep track of everything, but they rotate through all different programs and give them the microscope treatment. The water use program, it was a routine scheduled audit. We heard some rumors at one time it was a parting gift from Teresa Seibel that she volunteered for it. It turned out that was not true. I was really disappointed. That wasn't true.
You can still spread that rumor, she's gone. Out here to defend herself.
That's right. And then the end goal, of course, of any audit might be to identify problems, issues, and then improvements to be made. The audit findings, they're like 4 broad categories of the auditor's findings. The first one, site-specific review, sometimes exceed 10 days. Newsflash. And next one being insufficient enforcement of compliance violations. So this they lump together, or I lump together in this bullet here, both fees, which are levied, annual fees, which are levied against large fine withdrawals that are non-agricultural. Like tracking down those delinquent fees, and then withdrawal registrations, just your basic unregistered withdrawals or withdrawals that are operating differently than they were registered, or things like that. Insufficient enforcement of those. Next one was the insufficient internal security controls over the water withdrawal assessment tool database, our water use reporting database, and the batch tools, which I can explain a little bit more about those if you'd like. And then the final one being differences between the water withdrawal assessment tool and the batch tool results, that the actual stream flow depletion solution, or the result that you get out of those 2 different models or models essentially. What you get out of those, there's some differences between them at times. So that was the other audit finding there. Kind of run through this in a little bit more detail. Site-specific review, yes, it's obviously, as we talked about lots today and other times, it's difficult, I would say impossible personally, to always meet the 10-day deadline due to lots of different reasons. I like to put that asterisk in there. That's me. I actually got something that I wanted to put in here. We could meet that 10 days all the time. We just had to deny everything, but nobody wants that. So that was, I wanted to throw that in there. And then, yes, we talked about the proposal to change the 10-day working SSM deadline, which obviously was pointed out that that's not going to speed anything up. That's not going to fix the timeliness necessarily of these things. It's just a proposal to change the deadline. So the next one on insufficient enforcement of those compliance violations. Yeah, that's like an all day, every day kind of thing, is to keep up with both. Could be delinquent fees, could be delinquent water use reports also, which reports are required from each water user for each property for every year. Trying to keep up with all those. That would take a lot of time in and of itself, as would keeping up with withdrawal registrations that might be operating. So got the note here that we're going to initiate the lean process improvement exercise. This of course, the findings that the auditor came up with were not some again, they didn't discover or unearth something that we didn't know already here. But maybe try and identify some ways that we can improve or efficiency or things along those lines that would of course be always welcome. And then also updating the actual policies that we might have in place to be consistent with Eagle's department-wide compliance and enforcement policy. Take home message. This is just one person's opinion on that. So anything short of like hard line, fully prosecuting, and I mean that not necessarily in the litigious use of the term prosecuting, but like taking it to full completion of every violation, anything short of that it'd be insufficient in the eyes of an auditor, for instance. And that hard line is not the preferred approach that anyone probably wants, including Eagle. It's not the way we want to run a railroad here. But it is obviously an issue that we have to deal with. It's enforcement activities. So the next one there being the internal security controls being insufficient. So this was, it's important to note, I didn't put a bullet there, but important to note, this was not a security, like an IT security issue for outside users. This was just Eagle staff for internal use, whether some kind of malicious or unintentional mistake made on these databases that may change something. Also, we did make some changes as far as like updating staff privileges and whether they can grant new accounts to users or not. That's all that amounted to. to be honest with you, these really didn't pose a significant risk even internally, even if somebody was a disgruntled employee or careless in what they were doing. There wasn't a great risk for any of these things, but they show up in kind of made an official onboarding and offboarding procedure to basically, you know, some of the issue was when someone offboarded, changed to a different program within the state of Michigan or even within Water Resources Division, we didn't necessarily cut off their access to the database immediately. So now we'll do that, of course. So, and then the last thing is, there was an issue identified in the audit, which was not actually correct, but the audit, you know, that potentially the batch tool scripts that we use, they could be again altered and might give us some of those different results that I alluded to earlier. So we create an archive restricted access version of those so they stand to keep that going forward to make sure that we don't see changes. You can always refer back to those. Then the last one. So differences between the water withdrawal assessment tool and batch tool results. There are, and there always have been some minor discrepancies in the results. I call them relatively minor, though not insignificant, results between whether you're using this desktop version that we call the batch tool of the same model, the same stream flow depletion solution as we have in the water withdrawal assessment tool. They don't come out exact. And that, you know, that's an issue that we wrestle with. It's kind of become more clear to us just in the last year or so, but it is an issue. Our short-term response to this is that all of our site-specific review work and other work that our staff might be doing, stream flow depletion accounting, the water withdrawal assessment tool database, we do use the batch tool to try and be consistent with that. Obviously, outside users can only use the water withdrawal assessment tool, which might have some different results at times. But that's just the approach that we take. There's other reasons why we would be needing to use the batch tool anyway, which I'm happy to explain. But yeah, and then obviously at this point in time, we don't really have a good explanation of why we're seeing these differences at times. It's not the same withdrawal. It has different results at different times. It's different withdrawals or different locations in the state will have these. Will sometimes have variable results coming from the two methods of outcome exchange location. Long-term solution, you honestly would be, we need to update and completely rewrite the water withdrawal assessment tool. Maybe even kind of like hopefully incorporate into that. So you have just one platform that you're referencing and using the batch tools, incorporate that into that sort of dream scenario. The water withdrawal assessment tool is old, like software wise at this point, and we've been put on notice that it really does need to be updated. So some of the reasons why they're kind of threw them up on the screen real quick. You can read through those if you like. But yeah, that's I don't know how long term that might be, but that is someday down the road that'll obviously have to happen. And then, yeah, I got it ended here. I did prepare a few more slides to get into a little bit more details about the batch tool if we had time, and if time and interest allow, I can get into those, but otherwise just take questions. So that would, yeah.
So this audit happened, you got the report back. What are the next steps? Do you guys have an option to talk through with whoever is in charge of this? Like, here's why this happens, and then you try to come up with like solutions or improvement on some things, like
We talked about his James on the, I can't see.
He's still there,
Yeah, I know Kelly, he was gonna speak to a few things. So James, I don't know if you want to jump in and provide some background.
James, do you have anything you wanted to add on the auditor's report?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, again, I think Christina's about to jump into it. On all of these, we've already kind of outlined kind of some of the initial steps we have taken. The last one is one where we're, digging in with DTMB on a little bit more of an in-depth investigation on the data. The auditor doesn't really, for the most part, kind of follow up. So they leave it to the department to kind of make sure that we're addressing the issues that have been identified. And again, our report back to them kind of gives us the process we're going through to address any concerns that they may have identified. And you go back to like the first one, the 10-day rule. Well, that's one the whole committee may end up looking at, you know, so some of them we knew were kind of ongoing issues for a long time. But again, we're kind of following up on each of them and to the extent possible addressing them. And again, it's only the last one I think that's going to take a little deeper investigation into kind of what's exactly behind this discrepancy. In the meantime, again, we can run things in a way to make sure that it doesn't impact any decision making because of the awareness that it's out there now.
Thanks, James.
Other questions, discussion about it?
I had a question about, not this, the groundwater data management system, the Equus. Is that a system used strictly for Eagles purposes, or is that gonna be like a public facing system, or what type of data is gonna be in there? That's my question.
Yeah. I think Jim was the most best to answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the groundwater data management system is going to be a multi-phase implementation. Is going to be a multi-phase process of necessity. Initial phases will be, we've got data that's already in electronic format that can be easily uploaded into the system. Then there is hard copy format data that's siloed all over Eagle in multiple divisions that has to be scanned and uploaded. The intent long-term intent is that this groundwater data management system should be able to, will receive data from generated both by Eagle staff and also hopefully by external customers. So regulated parties, consultants can also submit data into the system.
I would, I'd give the comment on the auditor's report. Maybe just give my take to Eagle, leave it open as just a thought to kick around. You know, it's the department that you run. You got a typical, you know, audit process from the state. So you may probably just approach it as we're going to handle this and kind of handle it as an executive branch. But we're also charged by statute to make recommendations on the improvement and functioning of the program overall. And so if some of the solutions or the solutions possible to some of these things that have been raised should also come from us. And we should take a role in that, just kind of discussing, you know, hey, here's one way we could fix it. Here's the ideal way of fixing it. What would it take? I'm pretty positive that this group would take that responsibility on as well, and may even feel some need and responsibility to have some role in that, regardless of whether you guys kind of want to do it all on your own and take care of it. I think the challenge, right, is a lot of us only probably heard about this, you know, less than a month ago. So we haven't had a lot of time to dig in and hear. This is very helpful. I think we're planning on August coming back with ideas for recommendations that may be part of the report, which doesn't offer a credible amount of time to sit down with all of you and talk about the solutions and whether there's some recommendations for fixes or funding to help fix some of these issues. So a little time crunch, but with that said, still have many months, and I just keep that in you guys' minds and also council members, and think about what role we play in helping to address and make recommendations and improve some of this.
This is a quick, oh, go ahead.
Do we know when the previous audit was done? Because they have to audit what, every 5 or 10 years or 7 or something like that. Do we know when the previous one was done?
There's never been a previous audit done on this program. So I don't know if there's some kind of recurring schedule like that, but it's so we were missed.
Okay.
I can't recall. I just, when I heard of this, I haven't recalled.
What, 2008? Is when the WA went live?
8 or probably 9.
2009.
Yeah,
Okay.
2009.
Based on the time that it took this audit to go, which was months, I don't know how they could rotate through all the various stakeholders and unable to scale it
I've never heard of a program being audited more than once unless they have. They just don't have the capacity.
Okay.
And I've heard of very few that also get their reports listed on Gomware. So I thought that was very interesting.
Partly the time lately, he's getting a bit more attention than they've had, which is good.
It's one of the things I just wanted to make sure, and point out, again, kind of trying to bring perspective from growers and farmers around the state. There's been a perception for a long time that farmers don't really understand the batch tool. They don't understand what it's for. They feel like it's a block to transparency in terms of how Eagle makes decisions. And so probably the finding that stood out the most to them from this auditor's report is, hey, there are differences that can't be tracked down as to why they exist between the WUT and the batch tool. And so that's one that I'm really hoping you guys can help with clarifying information, keeping us up to date, anything that we can share back out with growers to help them understand what the department's doing to address the issue would help to set their minds at ease, I think, because that's one thing that I don't want to have this council or anybody make worse is that there's already, I think, kind of an atmosphere of distrust out there in the countryside. We don't want to make it worse. We want to provide good information to them to say, okay, this is what the Auditor General's office found. This is what Eagle's doing to fix it. And, some of those folks are going to just want high level, like kind of what you gave in the bullet points here. Some of them who are really experienced irrigators and know more about this system than I do, are going to want to know some nitty gritty details. So anything that you guys can share as a department back out as you're following up on steps with this would be very helpful.
Is one of them more conservative than the other?
Yes, so barely. So the results, I think I probably should have really slide it based on Laura's comments, which I was thinking along the same line. I'll show you here what the difference is basically. So real quickly, review on the batch tool. So it's a desktop version of the online one. So there's two reasons why we use it or why it exists. One is to run like multiple withdrawal scenarios very quickly. You could set up an input table and run, I don't know what the limit is, but we've done hundreds at a time in the past of just withdrawals and just like stepwise go through. So WUT gives you one cookie, that's where the name batch tool comes from. The second reason is it does allow you to input different aquifer property values than what's built in and fixed into the water withdrawal stats tool. So that's the reason we need to use that on a day-to-day basis, is if we have additional information, site specific review that provides there's a couple of different variables that you can adjust in the model there in the batch tool. So it allows us to do that. So the cookie, you got the WUT does just the nested toolhouse. Batch tool, there's actually 3 variables that you can do in the Hunt 99, the batch tools model. But that's the same idea there. So the difference is that the very big issue here that we're addressing is it's using the same mathematical formula. So you'd think that the identical inputs would give you identical results, and it should in theory, but as soon as they're placed on different platforms, like different software, different coding language for each one of them, you start to get different results. We learned this back when the tool was first put online in 2009. The original tool in that first 5-year period when it lived at Michigan State University and was developed and housed there, the original one, it was off by, I can't recall, and I looked, we don't have this documented anywhere, but it was kind of like 1% off. You'd run the same scenario through the online tool versus the batch tool. And it was kind of more or less realized that it was rounding issues. There's all these intermittent or intermediate calculations that happen within the model. And if you round values at different times and at different levels of precision, and including the unit conversion that might have to be done there, if they're not identical, then you're getting different results that might vary by that amount or something like that. In 2014 is when we rewrote the WUT and we migrated it over to the state of Michigan servers, and that was part of the deliverables. What we asked of the developer, again, MSU and Institute of Water Research asked them to try and get these results to match, and they almost did. was kind of from what, I wasn't in the room, but from what I understood, it was kind of a painstaking process to get the two versions basically of the same math equation there, math formula to spit out the same results. It took them some time, got it down to where it was really, really close. We did lots of testing. Every time we tested it, it was like down to, like I kind of got on the screen there, you're down to the hundredths of a gallon where they might be hundredths of a gallon per minute where they might be off. Thought we were all good there. And so it wasn't until about a year ago, I believe, sometime in early 2023, that we started to find a few results that deviated more from the batch tool, between the batch tool and the online tool. It was like, so yeah, 8% of those depletions were greater than a gallon per minute. The maximum we found was like an 8.7 gallon per minute difference, which is unacceptable for sure. We got to try and figure out what's going on there. And then I should note that, obviously it was whatever that is, 14 years, well, 9 years from the time that we thought we had it dialed in to where those two things matched up very well. So it's just not a course of business where since we did the testing initially and said, great, we've got a product that delivers the same results as the batch tool. It just wasn't part of the day-to-day task, like go back, I should check again and see if the batch tool matches the online tool. It was just, the idea was in our head that it did. So it wasn't just part of your everyday thing to like run the same scenario through the batch tool as you would through the online tool. The online tool is much faster if you're trying to use those or get those type of results where you don't have to change on the ground. So part of that investigation, we initially thought, and this is what got incorporated into the auditor's report. We thought that things like they were in track, and then they started to diverge in August 2021. We kind of narrowed it down to that. We thought, turns out after further investigation that wasn't the truth, and it does go back all the way to the history of the water withdrawal system tool. We will occasionally find these results that are diverge more. So that that'll be in the audit report where we thought that it started to change in August 2021. That turned out to not be true. It does tend to be lower depletion, so it'd be less conservative potentially in the online tool by a pretty small amount. So, well, first there's the breakdown there. A third of the time the watt's lower, 10% higher, and then I call it equal when they're within a tenth of a gallon per minute, which is about what we could ever accomplish, even when we thought everything was working great. We call that equal. 57% of the time. So I mentioned the maximum difference there was an 8.7 gallon per minute lower depletion in the watt the batch tool was giving. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the watt would, in one certain case, it was 5.1. The average difference is just a third of a gallon per minute. So most of them are actually quite close. Yeah, the cause, just not sure at this time. It's really, really time consuming to go back and try and to compare results. It seems like it should be a lot easier. The WAF database is not designed and set up to be able to like easily, this doesn't make sense. I could show you sometime, or you can trust me at this time. Like it's just not set up to like easily look at all the results for all the watersheds for a withdrawal scenario and compare it over here to a batch tool, which you've got to set up and run and get the results from that. So we just haven't dedicated enough time. I always think that we can figure it out if it's a result that's coming out of computer code. You should, we did confirm that the code hasn't changed. That again, that was incorrectly reported in the audit report, that it kind of implied or suggests that maybe the batch tool script had been modified and changed over time. That definitely has not happened. We went back with DTMB and confirmed that the watts code has not changed over that time. Either the groundwater depletion portion of that code is unchanged. We confirmed that the GIS inputs that go into those models that are required for it, those, if you use the identical GIS input files, you still sometimes get different results. So honestly, the best guess at this time, one thought, is that there are these third-party GIS routes, like subroutines within the two models that are called by the code, and it's possible that like the mechanism that it's using to measure differences from one platform, the online version versus the desktop version, maybe there's some small differences. I don't think it's very likely based on the difference that we saw at an 8.7 or 5.1 gallon per minute difference between the two. that doesn't seem real likely. But honestly, that's the best we can come up with at this time. I don't know how. It's beyond our capability to be able to look at the software code, this third party, the ESRI company, figure out if they might actually have some subtle differences in there. One problem, kind of echoing what Laura mentioned, is that we can't see the intermediate steps in the water withdrawal assessment tool. It's built in there, and obviously what you all see on the screen there from your computer is the same thing that we could see. We can look at the code, but you can't see the intermediate results as they're going along. We can see that with the batch tool, so that's why it's kind of like believed. We can see that there's nothing jumping out as some kind of anomaly that's happened on the batch tool when we run that, because we can see the intermediate results, the prorational depletion amongst all the streams and things like that, but you can't see it in the tool. So that's why we kind of think that maybe the batch tool could potentially be more reliable. I say reliable, it's not necessarily that we know that the online tool does something wrong or incorrectly. That's not really known at this time, but it does do something different. And we can see in the batch tool that nothing different is happening. So yeah, that kind of runs through everything that I prepared to try and address these, which I definitely agree are big questions, big issues.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Andy, forgive me, I'm not a hydrogeologist. You're gonna have to really dumb it down a lot. If I'm understanding this correctly, these are just mathematical calculations. They're an aligning. I'm gonna use an accounting procedure, column A isn't necessarily matching column B, even though you have the same data, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So it's not that you're adding additional data inputs and you're going to do different comparisons, correct?
Right.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I shouldn't do this. I should save this for a committee, but your explanation there of what you've done and what you're digging into is really good. And it made me wonder if I could tie this back to Dave Hamilton and the models committee work, where if you're right and very small differences with GIS and spatial relations, because of the way we attribute, allocate among stream flow depletions is so sort of like, hey, where's my close line? Would you be comfortable guessing that if we went to web squared, it would maybe be more resilient to those differences occurring?
I thought about that, yeah, and my guess, I told you what I think of my intelligence level compared to the rest of the folks in the room here, but I think it probably would. Yeah, I do think it probably would. If I don't know, I'm not aware of issues with that distance measurement thing being off if you have a real complex stream geography or something like that. But yeah, potentially that's it, where it might be mitigated by web squared.
Instead of drifting one way, just a teeny tiny rounding error spatially, if it changes the nearest distance and we're just picking one distance where the web squared averages by all the nearest points,
Then you get a ripple effect.
a small would just average it out. It wouldn't be a catastrophic, well, those aren't catastrophically different errors, but it might just be, if this is just happens, maybe that solution makes it more robust to that too. Sorry. That's a great explanation. Thank you. Any other questions on the Eagle update part of our agenda? This is good. This is meeting, and I'm cognizant that some of you may be getting a little antsy and that we're closing in on time. So we'll kind of move quickly through the rest of it here. Future meetings are listed in the agendas, so you should have them all: August 13th, September 10th, October 8th, November 12th, December 10th. It's listed that it would be a nice goal for us that at the next meeting, any of the committees again, kind of bring back a next step and what recommendations it's looking at being able to move forward to the committee over the following couple of months. That's not a, hey, have them ready. It's just, and I know some of the groups did it today, just kind of highlight, here's what we're working on that may be coming into the report that we may be presenting to you over September, October, November. Open comments. I'm going to pause first and see if there's any just open comments anywhere, but then I'm going to actually try to give my own comment and then ask Dave Sharon to maybe comment for a couple of minutes about something too. But any wide open comments open comments from the group or anybody online? We have one. Keep thinking if you have them. Howard Reeves, please go ahead.
Thanks, Brian. Just a couple comments just to confirm the drilling for the area down by the state line started yesterday, and Michigan Geologic Survey was out logging those cores, so that was good. I put in the meeting chat a meeting announcement for the Midwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. It's going to be held in East Lansing this year. That task center is out of University of Minnesota. It's mostly for people who have projects under their umbrella, but it does say potential partners. And one of the committees was talking about potential climate effects. So you can kind of look at that agenda and see if it would be a good fit for someone to attend with questions about climate effects in the Great Lakes region. And then the last thing for the batch tool, it turns out that the state of Wisconsin has similar interest in these analytic solutions, and some colleagues and I have written some pure Python functions that could replace the batch tool and maybe be used in a future online WAT. So we're hoping to also do a software release that would make it available to anyone to use it, the public, private sector as well. So hopefully we're hoping to get that done by end of summer. So maybe that will help with addressing some of these batch tool questions.
Howard. Anybody else?
My only thing is if you haven't signed in, please sign in before you go. That way we have an updated attendance sheet for the meeting minutes.
Thanks. So I will go and just say that appreciated everybody's kind of attention and efforts towards the drawing renewed focus on the need to get funding for the 2022 Water Use Advisory Council recommendations. Tried to be sensitive, appropriate, but sharing of information. Dave's taken lead on it. I know I've tried to do a few different things within our organization to raise awareness of the needs for that. And I think we've tried to share with all of you a suggestion that now seems to be an appropriate time to make any efforts you have if you'd like to speak up for that funding. Dave, do you have anything that you'd like to say or?
Well, yeah, we've got my state senator, Sean McCann, is vice chair of Senate Appropriations. Excuse me. So I reached out to him after we found out there was a substantial, we think, $200 million excess in the budget that's not accounted for. And so I said, well, is there any chance, talking to him about the need for this for a long time. I said, how much, what can you do? He put a placeholder in, just no dollar amount on, just a placeholder in the Senate Appropriations Committee. So we've got an opportunity, to include hopefully all of what we've got an ask for, which is 4 programs at $1,215,000. I guess we'll have to see where that all goes, but I also talked to another state senator. I know a lot of state senators because I serve with them in the House. So it's easy for me to, easier to get a response from those people than it is simply calling out of the blue. I hardly know any House members, but I know at least half of the state senators. Anyway, so I talked to Sam Singh, who's the vice chair of Eagle Propes subcommittee, but he's also, majority floor leader. I have his intention on it. So he's also indicated that he's going to see what he can do, to get our funding. Everybody's going to be looking at this money though. So it's not like we're the only people that know about it in this case. So everybody's, I'm sure they've all got a really important ask, but we got something that didn't get funded last time. So I'm trying to, make the impression that we really need it. And fact of the matter is, if it comes out of this committee with all of its competing interests, it probably has a good amount of solid work done for the state of Michigan. So that's kind of where we're at, but if you happen to know somebody and know a senator on appropriations, either Eagle subcommittee or the full committee, give them a call, tell them, you know, we've got a placeholder in there, it's really important. You know, we've been waiting a long time for this stuff, and this puts a lot of other things on hold that we want to do. So that's pretty much it, just, and as far as the House goes, I know you've talked to some folks in the House, and they should probably have at least an inkling of what's going on in the Senate, so when it does hopefully come about, you know, we can transition with the House and get some sort of an agreement between the two bodies, which is, and then of course the governor. So lots of things at play, but at least we've got an opportunity to get our order of water.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 2 state budgets that it hasn't been a priority. There's a shot. $1.2 million is a lot of money in some regards. It's not in a lot of other regards. And I think this body was constructed and given appointments based on the fact that we represent a lot of different entities with a stake and citizens with different stakes in water. And the original notion was that if we can all find a way to agree with each other on this, instead of, you know, evolving into water law fighting, that it should matter. So whatever you are able or is appropriate to do to help highlight some of those recommendations you all participated in creating with us would be good. So we left that as an open comments. Any other open comments?
We all know that John Yelich is retiring, correct? His successor has been appointed. Okay.
Yes.
I won't say anything.
I got a press release.
Yeah.
Todd Feenstra, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to not reiterate, but remind the council or point out to the council that the growers across the state are very, very interested in managing the water resource and doing it well. You know, the group that we work with there is now up to 225 monitoring wells across the state and about 300 stream sites. So they're actively engaged, and that funding for that is coming from the individual farmers. It's not grant funded. There's no other dollars coming in. So these guys are interested enough in knowing what their impact is to pay for measurements on that. Has nothing to do with modeling, has nothing to do with all the stuff we're talking about here and, you know, web squared or anything like that. These guys are very interested in knowing what their impacts are to the point that they're taking the time to put their own money into it and monitor those resources. So one just didn't know when the last time we'd updated the council on that, but that just continues to grow. We put 9 new monitoring wells in the last week. So there's a growing database there and a growing interest.
Good work. Right. I'm not seeing any other, there he is, John Yelich. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say 11 years has flown by exceedingly fast. So I just appreciate everybody's support and getting funding for the survey and what we're doing, and looking forward to Sarah Pearson taking the chair and working everything forward positively for everybody.
Thanks for all of your involvement. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
And congratulations. And
Yes, congratulations, John.
resentment towards you.
We'll expect you to make comments during the public comment period after you retire.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment that I had as well. I did get information that the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology is gathering data right now. They have a public comment that's available, not through the normal, like normally when we make public comments on administrative agencies, we go to regulations.gov. This is not available there. You actually have to go to the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. They're taking public comments on what role the federal government should have in managing water use. And you know, I think from the perspective of a lot of states, the answer to that is you shouldn't. But, there's also a lot of interest in Western states where water is scarce and states fight with each other. I think that the federal government wants to be seen as doing something. However, it is an opportunity for folks to weigh in. I don't know if Eagle's planning on weighing in on behalf of the water use program. But if you guys have an interest in it, it is, anybody can make a comment through the PCAST website to talk about, you know, here's what we see as the role of state agencies, federal agencies in managing water uses and water withdrawals.
All right, well, 2 minutes to say I would accept a motion to adjourn. And it's Tom, second by Dave Maturin. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
To do it.
Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Well,